have no idea how to even start this video essay. And that's exactly how I'm gonna start this video essay. SonnyBoy is a 1-season, 12-episode anime original show that aired in the summer of 2021. The first episode was released July 16th and the series concluded on October 1st. Before I start analyzing the show though, I have to insert a massive disclaimer that everything I'm about to say in this essay is mostly just my personal interpretation, and SonnyBoy is a story of many possible interpretations. My own ideas, interpretations, and opinions on this show have changed drastically ever since I watched it for the first time 2.5 years ago. Hell, they've changed from when I started writing the script for this video a couple months ago. This is exactly because SonnyBoy is a show that leaves about 90% of itself up to your own interpretation. However, what I think makes SonnyBoy so amazing and sets it apart from other abstract postmodern art is that SonnyBoy doesn't achieve this openness to interpretation through the omission of content, but rather the exact opposite. Instead of leaving the responsibility of filling in the blanks up to the viewer, SonnyBoy overloads the audience with an overwhelming amount of information without elaborating on much of it, whether it be visually, narratively, or emotionally, sometimes even purposefully contradicting itself in its abundance of information. It's like the story is inventing itself as it goes along, leaving the task up to you to make thematic connections, whether it be within the show, from the show to the real world, or from the show to your own life. Rather than just leaving things up to your interpretation, SonnyBoy leaves the story in its entirety up to the viewer to figure out. It's like a puzzle that can be arranged in millions of different ways. Everyone will end up making a different puzzle with the pieces SonnyBoy puts at your disposal. Everyone will take away something different after having watched the show. Over the course of just 12 episodes, SonnyBoy will have you asking hundreds of questions and gradually figuring out answers to all of them, figuring out exactly what it is you're watching, what's happening, what's important, what's symbolic, how does this world work. And just when you finally start to think you have a sense of what's going on, right when you start to feel you're able to keep up, SonnyBoy will reinvent itself completely, like a painting you only just started to decipher suddenly covering itself with a new coat of paint and reorganizing the entire composition of the scene, leaving you guessing once again. SonnyBoy is an enigma. Your first watch of the show, you won't understand any of it. The second watch, you'll start to notice more and more recurring themes. By your third watch, you'll think you're starting to understand it. And after a while, when you finally reflect on your somewhat coherent thoughts on SonnyBoy, you'll throw all those thoughts out the window because you just realized a new possible meaning in a scene and you'll revise your entire interpretation of the show. Your opinion on this show will keep changing, transforming along with you. And that's what makes it so amazing. It takes this long to start figuring out SonnyBoy because SonnyBoy quite delusively sets you up to ask the wrong questions. Questions concerning the plot rather than the character's personal development. Even now, after having attentively watched the show over a dozen times, I still feel like I'm only scratching the surface of all the things this show means to say. Even after all the analyzing I've done on the show, I feel like there is still just as much, if not more, to yet discover about the meaning of SonnyBoy. The more I understand these 12-20-minute episodes, the more I feel like there are still so many more life lessons I can get from it. SonnyBoy is like the quantum mechanics of TV shows. The more you understand it, the less you understand it. And if you claim to understand it, you don't understand it at all. Even while writing this essay, I'm not sure if I'll be able to explain what makes SonnyBoy so great, or even what the show's essential meaning is. Even after making it my life's mission for the last couple months to completely break down and analyze this show, I am still trying to figure out key elements of this show. Even I am still trying to figure out the true meaning of SonnyBoy. Even I am still trying to figure out what the animated TV show SonnyBoy is actually really, truly, completely trying to tell me. In the show SonnyBoy, we follow the story of a senior year of middle schoolers going quote-unquote adrift and having to deal with the absurdity of abstract dimensions and worlds. These different dimensions and worlds serve as the foundation of SonnyBoy's plot as the kids try to get back from this new world to their home world. The kids decide to call this world, like that's the actual name they use to refer to this new dimension they now find themselves in, which I can assure you makes for pretty confusing dialogue at times. This world is a world that seems to operate on a set of completely arbitrary rules. It's a world governed by the absurd. A bunch of things happen that don't really make sense in this world. Left is right and up is down, literally. There is even little to no consistency within the laws and rules of this world themselves. The show is filled with lots of these random, inexplicable but mind-boggling concepts that don't really have an explanation. At the start of the show, we learn the school building is apparently sinking into this pitch-black abyss. But then, this world changes from the dark nothingness to a bright tropical setting, and while the school is still in an ocean, it has suddenly stopped sinking for some reason. It's all really too absurd to put into words. These cats, who for some reason transported along with the kids, somehow have the ability to deliver any item as if they're a postal service. The principal of the school just so happens to be literally God. A boy suddenly turns into a giant dog as a result of his mental state, and even though this dog, who used to be a boy, was 2 years younger than the main cast back in the original world, at the time he meets our main cast, he is over 5,000 years older than them, even though he went adrift 2 years later than them, and the entire time you're watching, you're just going, what? Space and time don't make any sense in this world. Nothing really makes any sense in this world, at least not at first glance. Another weird rule of this world is that every kid seems to have their own abstract superpower. The essence of these powers varies incredibly widely, from this dude who can make his finger light up to Asakaze's power, who can literally alter the reality of this world to his liking. We're talking controlling the weather, flying, extinguishing entities, changing the visual composition of reality itself, just an extremely original take on being all-powerful. Other powers include Mizuho's, which locks the physical state of all the kids' bodies in a stasis from the moment they went adrift.
Then there's Nozomi, whose power is that she can always see a certain light. Sometimes the light is far off, sometimes nearby. Nozomi is convinced this light is the way home, and she urges the group to all try and reach this light that only she can see. Our main character Nagara's power is the power to create new D's worlds entirely and teleport himself and others to them. Over the course of the show, the kids try to use their powers as well as holdovers from various D's worlds,
I will get back on that, to try and find their way home. For the first half of the show, the kids are collectively set on the goal of trying to get home, and they get really close with the director's cut project, which basically comes down to the idea that they're going to literally edit themselves back into their own world using actual tapes and editing software. I'm telling you, this show overflows with original concepts like this. And then, after 6 episodes of trying to get home and finally getting this close that they can literally see their own home world again, after finally getting this close to the light that Nozomi can just reach out and grab it, God just tells them,
君たちはもう必要ないんだよ.
And their existence in their original world is rejected entirely. They're revealed to just be castaway copies, and their original selves are just living their lives in their world. After this event, everyone just kind of accepts that this is their life now, and they all try to settle into this world. The main characters though, Nagara, Mizuho, and Nozomi, keep up the effort to go back home despite the word of God. And then, in a way, the story becomes about prevailing against the world itself, just like this monkey umpire in the monkey baseball episode. Yes, you heard that correctly, there's monkeys playing baseball in the show. The ending of the show leaves the viewer with a very bittersweet feeling. Nagara and Mizuho end up getting home with the help of Rajdhani, who is now 2000 years old because, you know, space and time is flexible in this world. However, in the 6th episode, Nozomi finds out that in the real world, she is dead, and the only thing keeping her alive is the static nature of this world. Then, in episode 10, Nozomi dies in this world too, but a physical manifestation of her spirit is left behind in the form of a compass. And because Nagara Nagara and Mizuho take this compass with them to their world, Nozomi is alive again. However, she has no memory of going adrift or her friendship with Nagara, and the viewer is left guessing if they'll ever be friends again. Now, if nothing I just tried to explain made any sense to you and you're still confused about everything, that means you're starting to get it. Something practical to note is that this world is a term used to refer to the whole of all the different new dimensions the students are stranded in, as well as every separate dimension. As I said, this terminology can be kind of confusing, but it basically means that every world the students visit outside their home world is another this world. Every this world the students visit is always a unique, conceptually incredibly well thought out interactive space.
The variety of the forms these worlds can take range from a world made entirely out of ceramic to just a plain red mass.
You want to peep the horror? Here.
These different architectures of all these worlds the show presents always serve to drop the characters in the perfect metaphorical scene to most efficiently and accurately dissect their current struggles.
These worlds adapt very literal manifestations of the characters' inner turmoil,
and narratively they're used to emphasize how exactly the characters overcome their challenges, the challenges this world throws at them.
These worlds are really just
Big plot devices to help develop the characters' inner as well as outer journeys and hit on the philosophical points the show means to make.
and that's what makes the idea of these worlds so
Great. From a writer's point of view, the forms a this world could take are conceptually endless, but it's the current mental task the characters have to face that determines what kind of this world they should be placed in. The Monkey Baseball and Tower of Babel episodes are great examples of this, which I'll get more into later. I think my favorite this world in SonnyBoy is the movie theater this world.
In this world, there's a bunch of film tapes that visually manifest other these worlds.
This means that by editing the tapes, the characters can edit the reality of various these worlds altogether,
Even pasting multiple these worlds onto each other.
The show really plays with all the possible ideas of a world whose visual composition is completely alterable with your own hands. I mean, just look at this little visual gag of Nagara adjusting the focus of the projector of this world.
ごめん大丈夫今何したの
And there's so many more unique and amazing This Worlds like this one throughout the show. For example, the This World from episode 8 made up entirely of what seem like different colored glass panes on a black backdrop. There's never really any explanation as to why the These Worlds look the way they do, but you can always sort of guess or speculate, and that's what makes their creativity so fun. Something else that's interesting about the concept of This World is that every This World is quote-unquote conquerable, though I prefer the term solvable. The different These Worlds are kind of like big puzzles, and if you solve the puzzle, you get a reward, a holdover. The way to solve a this world can vary from using logic reasoning to having a character go through an emotional development, and if that sounds abstract, it's because it is. A simple example of the characters conquering a this world is when they conquer the mice this world in episode 5. At the start of the episode, the gang visits this two-dimensional this world where mice are being terrorized by Pac-Man-like predators. So to solve this world, they box in the predators by drawing lines on the two-dimensional world, like kids drawing chalk on the pavement. They then lead the mice to a safe spot so Asakaze can use his power to eliminate all the boxed-in predators. By tackling the problem of this world pragmatically, they conquered it, and the reward they get, the holdover from this world, is this computer mouse, which has the power to untie knots, solve computer code errors, and any other minor physical or virtual task. On top of that, the computer mouse also squeaks like an actual mouse. I mean, how fucking brilliant is all of that? The holdovers are literally like manifestations of the essence of this world, whether it be a ball of fur whose scent will never change, or just a gun. Now, I'm simplifying it a lot because from how I understand it, there's a difference between holdovers from this world and superpower holdovers, which are, as the name suggests, physical manifestations of the kid's superpowers. And the show is intentionally really vague on when a holdover is a superpower holdover or a holdover achieved by conquering a Disworld. On top of that, at a certain point it's revealed that death doesn't really exist in this world, and instead, in this world, people die by gradually turning into static objects. When Nozomi dies, for example, she turns into a compass.
I'll get more in depth on that way towards the end of this essay, but this idea that people turn into holdovers when they die feels very similar to the superpower holdovers and the holdovers these worlds leave behind.
It almost makes you feel like there's some sort of congruency going on between the essence of people
and the essence of these worlds.
In fact, as someone who's seen the show in both languages multiple times now,
the concept of superpowers, these worlds, and people
all feel a bit synonymous, like they're all sort of one and the same. But that's something I'll let somebody else dissect, because that would be a whole chapter on its own. I mean, there's just so goddamn much to dissect about this show that really...
Making a video essay about SonnyBoy almost feels pointless, exactly because there is just so much to say about this show. Like, a conversation needs to be had about SonnyBoy before we can actually start having a conversation about it. Though I am happy to note that even with the show's limited fan base, there's already a handful of amazing video essays on it. I'd written a bit where I was gonna go over all those different video essays from all those different creators, but I'd written that before I knew I was gonna record this bit talking live to a camera, so I'm just gonna show that part by scrolling the text over the screen, because it's just too much to remember. Anyway, this abundance of good video essays, despite the show's lack of popularity, isn't really surprising, because SonnyBoy is the type of show that just begs you to make a video essay on it. This is the type of show that grabs you by the head, slams your forehead to theirs, looks you in the eye aggressively and screams, "Analyze me!"
And every video essay I've seen about SonnyBoy always beautifully delves into entirely different topics and relates the show to entirely different meanings and themes. But there is one thing that every SonnyBoy video essay has in common, and that is that it's always started off or ended with a disclaimer saying, "These are just my personal interpretations and takeaways from the show, but really, you should just watch the show yourself and come to your own conclusions about it," even after giving an extremely detailed, in-depth analysis on the show. This is by no means a trend I mean to break though. SonnyBoy is something you should experience for yourself and take your own personal meaning away from. However, that doesn't really make for a very enticing video essay, so I am gonna talk about my own personal interpretations.
I just feel like we need there to be way more video essays or just general analysis about the show, just to establish a general outline on everything SonnyBoy achieves in doing. We need there to be video essays deconstructing the visuals and how each shot serves as either a creative treat, a symbolic abstraction, or both at the same time. We need there to be video essays deconstructing the kids' superpowers and how they relate to each character as an individual and how it unveils the essence of their person. We need there to be video essays deconstructing the sparing use of the beautiful soundtrack and how it always manages to perfectly encapsulate the eccentric feelings of the moments when they play. We need there to be video essays deconstructing the story and how at first it seems impossible to follow, but upon closer inspection is just the most simple tale of kids trying to find their way home. We need there to have been a conversation about all of these aspects that define SonnyBoy and distinguish it as an audiovisual piece of media in a league of its own before we can actually start having a conversation about SonnyBoy. Only after deconstructing all of these things can we start talking about the heart of SonnyBoy. Only then can we start talking about what SonnyBoy is really about. And that is a great fucking question. I genuinely don't know what the essence of this show is, and I couldn't explain it to someone if they asked me to. Put a gun to my head, ask me to explain the meaning of SonnyBoy, and I'll start whispering prayers because I know I'll be at the pearly gates in a second. There are still a lot of elements of this show that I don't understand at all. What's this whole Asakaze supposedly created? And what's the significance of these unchronological visuals of a skateboard falling into it? What's this visual of this eclipse or black hole thing on this chalkboard? Why is the school floating the entire time, but by the end of the show, it's suddenly sinking? Why is the tip of Hatano Island just randomly gone sometimes? And what is the true meaning of that line, "We weren't able to change the world after all, so it's okay"? Even after years of rewatching, analyzing, and writing, there's still a lot that even I don't understand about SonnyBoy. But the beautiful part about that is that maybe you will be able to find meaning in those aspects where I failed to find it. I've drawn my own conclusions about the meaning of SonnyBoy and noticed my own metaphors in the show. But I think everyone can find a different meaning in SonnyBoy, and that's what makes the show truly one of a kind. I think anyone can look at SonnyBoy and relate with their own set of issues. I myself have gone through different interpretations of this show. I first watched it over 3 years ago, and I've taken away so much more meaning from SonnyBoy since that first watch. In fact, after finishing SonnyBoy for the very first time back in October 2021, I'd actually started writing a script for a video essay on it, but as you'll see, I couldn't even get halfway through writing the script because I realized I had to let my thoughts on the show age a bit before I could actually write something sensible about it. But for that very reason, I actually loved that first draft of that conceptual script so much, because you can see that I hadn't made up my own mind on my interpretation of SonnyBoy yet. I didn't understand SonnyBoy at all, I just knew I wanted to make a video essay about it. Here, you'll see what I mean. This is the first script I ever attempted to write on SonnyBoy. Storytelling has the same structure and coherency as a 7-year-old with ADHD explaining what happened at the playground. And it rules. During the first episode, you get the impression that the show is gonna be a Lord of the Flies meets Marvel type story that takes place inside a high school, and that within the school there's gonna be power structures and politics. But no. It immediately throws that premise out the window and quite literally jumps into a completely new setting, leaving the concept of being inside the school entirely until the end. Story forces the audience to keep up, no internal monologuing explaining every last detail of the situation, mostly because the characters themselves barely react to the life-changing stuff that's happening. At least, they're never in disbelief of what's going on. They've literally been thrown outside of time and space, and this girl just goes, "Ugh, there goes my summer vacation." Everyone's got superpowers for some reason, and they all just go, "Let's play football." This guy sees all his classmates disappear and hears a voice inside his head saying, "You're going to fall out of this dimension and be stuck in a world ruled by the absurd," and he goes, "Oh really? Tell me all about it," to the random voice in his head that eventually happens to be God, but also the principal of the school. Of course, as a viewer, you're not indifferent to the story, so while you're trying to follow, the show just keeps moving at 20 light years per second, and it doesn't stop to check on you to see if you're keeping up, like a math teacher demanding you to keep up and move on to page 135, even if you've only fully solved about 3 exercises from the last 134 pages. Except, the math is really fun. Doesn't have an OP, no cold open, jump straight into the weird bullshit. Good visuals, symbolic visuals, episode 1, 1542. Depression not fixed by getting a girl, interesting ideas, Tower of Babel episode versus guy fighting himself episode. Superpowers, entitlement, actual powers, and rumors growing to hate. That was the first script I ever attempted to write on SonnyBoy. See, it's not my best work, but at the same time, that is kind of what SonnyBoy is about, isn't it? When you strip it down to its core, to the most bare bones interpretation of the show, it's a little bit about all of the things in that shitty script. I'm just missing a whole lot of nuance. The main takeaway you'll have at the end of this video is that SonnyBoy is about whatever you want it to be about. And while that sounds really dumb, this show makes that idea actually incredibly exciting just because it has so much content. So many beautiful visuals you can project your own personal interpretation onto. So much peculiar phrasing of dialogue you can draw your own personal conclusions from. So many unsolved mysteries you can fill in with your own answers. So many things that are implied, and so little things that are explicitly stated. To uncover all these aspects, you have to pay extremely close attention. Every single shot, every single word, every single second of SonnyBoy exists for the purpose of extending the show's possible meanings and interpretations. And the only way you can begin to understand anything at all about SonnyBoy, the only way you can begin to understand these worlds and these characters, the only way you can begin to understand why these characters act the way they act and whether they're even being truthful to themselves, the only way to try and achieve uncovering their true character is by looking very, very closely. Throughout SonnyBoy's run, there are in total 16 close-up shots of Nozomi's eyes, 17 if you count this one. My interpretation of these close-ups is that it's used every time Nozomi pays close attention to someone's words, actions, or general behavior to decipher their true character. By paying close attention, Nozomi sees people for what they really are, what they really feel at their core, not what they act like or what they say or possibly even what is said about them. You could say that Nozomi's real superpower is attentiveness. Throughout the run of the show, there are multiple instances of rumors spreading like wildfire, quite literally even in episode 2, whether it be by word of mouth or simply by what people want to believe is the truth. Mizuho is using her power to set everything on fire. Nagara consciously trapped us in this world and refuses to bring us home. False assumptions are a plague in this world. Drawing false conclusions about people's character through a lack of trust in their truthfulness is a theme that runs through SonnyBoy at its core, and I think there's definitely an essay to be made about that topic alone. Nozomi, however, sees past these contorted stories of reality and always goes to investigate the truth of the matter, the truth of people. And not only does Nozomi constantly search for the truth of other people's character, she's also one of, if not the only character on the show to always be truthful herself, truthful to others as well as to herself. The show's SonnyBoy is filled with lies and half-truths. The characters constantly lie to themselves as much as to others. This world itself is filled with lies and misinformation. For example, the so-called shooting stars in episode 7 that turn out to be disgusting predatory worms. More on that later. On top of that, the show keeps contradicting itself, constantly giving wrong answers to the mysteries it presents. Is Misaki their teacher, or is she just someone pretending to be their teacher? The show says she isn't their teacher in the dialogue, but shows she is their teacher in the visuals. Even God himself is constantly contradicting himself and misleading the kids on whether they can go home or not. One minute he says they're trapped in this world, the next he tells Nagara there's still time, and then he just shows the kids they're trapped again. There isn't even any consistency in the lies of this world. In this way, the show demands the viewer as well as the characters to decide their own truth. For example, for the kids who accept God's dismissal as a truth, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, but to Nagara, who calls God's bluff, it's revealed that this declaration was nothing more than a false deterrent. Back to Nozomi though, despite the fact that Nozomi doesn't really have an incredibly powerful superpower, throughout the show she always feels like one of the most prominent and powerful characters. And it's exactly because she's just such a powerful person on her own. Regardless of the strength in the physics of this world, she has a strength of character that nobody besides maybe Nagara towards the end is able to replicate. A strong character with a good moral compass, a presence that feels empowering just to be near to. And I think there are multiple reasons for why this feeling of power Nozomi radiates is so strong, like her constant optimism, perseverance, and truthfulness. But I think the most important reason is probably Nozomi's ability to read people and see what's really in their soul. In episode 10, Nozomi is placed side by side with Kasetsu, a girl with the power to literally read minds. And Kasetsu basically confirms that Nozomi is the only person who treats others without any deceit. Nozomi is the only person who is always 100% truthful. She is the only character in the entirety of SonnyBoy who at not a single point in the show lies or tries to be deceptive. And again, just for reference, even God is continually lying in SonnyBoy. Now, as episode 10 progresses and these two characters, Nozomi and Kasetsu, go through the same situations together, it becomes more and more clear that it almost seems as if Nozomi has the power to read minds too. Not that she actually has that power, but rather that she's just able to figure out the essence of people by taking into account all the factors that might make them act the way they do or make them say the things they say. Nozomi looks beyond the facade people put up to see their true intentions, their true beliefs, their true desires, their true character, I guess. We silly humans don't always say or do what we actually feel. I think all of us have had those moments where we say something we don't really mean or do something that feels out of character, whether it be to impress others, to convince yourself of something, or possibly even to hurt someone. Everyone has at some point in their life put up a facade towards another person, consciously or subconsciously. But Nozomi sees past those facades and sees people's shotai, as you'd say in Japanese. One's true nature. She's immune to how people want to come across and instead sees people's true essence. An essence that's sometimes even a mystery to oneself. Who is the real you? It's probably one of the toughest questions we can ask ourselves, and SonnyBoy consoles us in this difficulty. But before I expand on that, I have to talk about another show that dissects this question of who is the real you even more thoroughly. And that is, of course, none other than Neon Genesis Evangelion. Yes, we finally got there, comparing SonnyBoy to NGE. I know it's an obvious one, but SonnyBoy and Evangelion just share too many thematic and philosophic similarities to ignore. I'll be mentioning Evangelion a couple more times throughout the run of this essay, just because SonnyBoy and Evangelion are both such incomparable shows that it oxymoronically enough causes them to be more alike to each other than any other show. I mean, the two main characters from both shows go through extremely similar journeys of self-acceptance and change. Shinji learns he shouldn't run away from his issues. Nagara learns he shouldn't run away from his issues. Shinji learns he's capable of change. Nagara learns he's capable of change. Shinji learns to love himself. Nagara learns to love himself. The two characters are quite comparable. Both Nagara and Shinji follow the journey of learning that they have to know how to love themselves before they can start establishing relationships with others. It's even a lyric in the ending theme of SonnyBoy, as well as a quote in the final episode of Evangelion.
でもな、僕は嫌いなんだ。自分が嫌いな人は他人を好きに信頼するようになれないわ。
However, what I find interesting is that while SonnyBoy and Evangelion discuss a lot of the same introspective topics, the two shows ultimately end up voicing different views on those topics. I should add really quickly that I just mean in my interpretations of the shows, because just like SonnyBoy, Neon Genesis Evangelion has endless possible interpretations, and of course there's a chance you disagree with mine, which is totally fine. I think the main point where the two shows diverge in philosophical vision is the idea that the only person who can truly fully understand someone is oneself. In the final episode of its original run, Evangelion stresses the point that it's fundamentally impossible for others to fully understand you in your entirety, and that you yourself are the only person that can really understand the being that is you. SonnyBoy, on the other hand, often declares that it's tough for ourselves to know our own true character. The main reason for it being that we don't have an objective point of view on ourselves, and thus can't peer that deep into our subconscious.
本心はさ、なかなか言えないものなんだよ。
This quote in specific traces it back to being a matter of truth, as again, Nozomi is the only character who is always able to unabashedly talk about what's in her heart, and also knows when other characters are being untrue to their own heart. In SonnyBoy, there are multiple occasions where characters are unaware of their true subconscious desires and their own content of character, which ironically enough leads to the death of Nozomi. Asakaze kills Nozomi in a moment where he literally betrays not just his words, but his very thoughts in his actions. This shocking scene is emphasized by having Kasetsu there, the girl who can actually literally read Asakaze's mind. Kasetsu always believed she knew Asakaze's real character because she could read his mind, and as a result knew all of his thoughts and feelings that he never showed to anyone. But as it turns out, Asakaze's true nature is hidden even to himself, as the god of SonnyBoy's universe puts it.
心の奥底は自分でも覗けない。
Despite the difficulty of it though, Nozomi is the type of person who tries to puzzle together what people are actually like to their core by paying extremely close attention to their actions, words, expressions, and general character, figuring out whether they're a good person deep down. Now, in the first season of Bojack Horseman, there's this great quote from Diane when Bojack asks her if she thinks he's a good person deep down, which goes,
"That's the thing. I don't think I believe in deep down. I kind of think all you are is just the things that you do."
This is such a simple yet profound quote. At the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is whether you're a nice person. If you live your life being shitty to people, then it doesn't really matter what you're like deep down, because you're still just being a negative presence, despite whatever your true character deep down might be. I think in a way this is applicable to Shinji from Evangelion too. While the eventual conclusion of Shinji Ikari's instrumentality is that he learns that it's okay for him to exist, despite the absolute horrible things he's done, the first thing that Shinji does when he wakes up from instrumentality is regress back into his destructive behavior, driven by his sense of loathing. He instantly goes on to attempt to choke the life out of Asuka, the only other living person left on the planet, just to fulfill that desire to be alone. And sure, Shinji constantly feels guilty after doing shitty things, but that doesn't stop him from persevering in his awful behavior. Same with Bojack Horseman. Bojack wants to believe that deep down he's a good person, but then he just just keeps doing shitty things over and over and continues to feel bad about it as if that makes it okay. It doesn't. I think the point I'm trying to make is conveyed most beautifully in the words of generational thinker Kendall Roy when he said,
Cunt is as cunt does.
Wow, now I'm just picturing these three in a room together. What a nightmare rotation. And while they'd all be locked in a stalemate of lingering on the verge of suicide due to being so guilt-ridden by their own horrible actions, Mr. Peanut Butter would come in and say, Bojack Horseman, Shinji Ikari, Kendall Roy, and Mr. Peanut Butter in the same room? What is this, a crossover episode? Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Personally, I do believe in a deep down essence of one's character. That people might act nice or rude, but that the why behind those nice or rude actions is what's really important when we judge someone. And anyone that knows the first thing about philosophy will know that this is kind of in line with the thinking of Kant's deontology, but I don't plan to get into that kind of boring stuff in this video. I do have to add that I don't think having good intentions, or at least not having bad intentions deep down, automatically absolves you of anything, as I've explained. To actually become a good person, we need to bring that deep down to the surface. And I think that's what SonnyBoy is trying to say too, and that it's only when we bring that deep down to the surface that we can truly begin to understand ourselves. This is why Nagara ends up being able to fully understand himself and be truthful in his thoughts, but Asakaze is unable, as we see in episode 10. The main reason that Nagara ends up being able to bring his good inner character out is because Nozomi is constantly encouraging him and helping him in this task. A perfect scene to illustrate this is a flashback scene right in the first episode. This scene supposedly takes place right before the kids went adrift. It starts off in what seems like the teacher's staff room. Nagara is there having a conversation with his homeroom teacher while Nozomi is picking up some new school book, since she's a transfer student who probably doesn't have all her school supplies yet. In the dialogue between Nagara and his homeroom teacher, nothing is explicitly stated, but again, many things are implied, and it's alluded to that Nagara isn't really in a good place mentally. And when the teacher says that Nagara can always come talk to him, Nagara thanks him very formally and says that he's grateful. But the stiffness of his answer betrays his words and makes it clear that he's never going to talk about these intimate things to his teacher, or even to anyone else. Then, a swift breeze lifts the curtain that separates Nagara and his homeroom teacher from the rest of the room. And as the curtain lifts, Nozomi's eye is revealed. Paying close attention, looking at Nagara, peering into this private setting, peering into Nagara's inner character. I personally think there's definitely a theme running through SonnyBoy of invading personal spaces, visualized quite literally in episode 3 for example, which can of course be deconstructed symbolically. But I don't want to get too off track, so I'll leave that up to someone else to deconstruct. As Nozomi's eye falls back behind the curtain, you get the feeling she must have heard everything. I mean, the only thing separating Nagara and the teacher's conversation from the rest of the room are these thin drapes, and Nozomi is peering through them. Now, it takes any old middle schooler to overhear a private conversation and maybe gossip to their friends about it, but Nozomi simply leaves this bit of information for what it is and goes on with her day. It's only by what seems a pure coincidence that she encounters Nagara again on the roof. Nozomi had come to the roof to rip apart the school book she'd just picked up, and Nagara comes to the roof to just be alone for a bit, I think. When Nozomi notices Nagara though, she invites Nagara to join her in ripping apart her book, as a way to immediately try and bridge that distance she feels he consciously creates with people. Nozomi makes the effort to start something that might one day look something like a friendship. We then get one of my favorite shots from the whole show. Nagara on the right with literal dark clouds hanging over him, and Nozomi on an elevated platform on the left with nothing but blue skies over her, as if these two skies are enveloped in a battle for screen space. Nagara declines Nozomi's offer to tear up the book though, and claims he has something to do. And like the chat Nozomi is, she immediately calls Nagara out on his bullshit, being the truthful motherfucker she is. Nozomi climbs down to speak to Nagara and get closer to him, and as she jumps down to Nagara's level, the dark clouds envelop the entire scene. Nozomi sees that this bitch ass Nagara doesn't have anything to do, he's just trying to escape this interaction because he's scared of interacting with others. She then confronts Nagara with the question if he really wants to leave. Nagara doesn't respond and tries to exit, but the way out is shut. Nozomi then angrily asks Nagara if he's running away. Again, Nagara doesn't respond and in a futile effort continues to try to open the locked door. And I think it's at this point that Nagara's stress and fear comes to a point of eruption, that fear of a confrontation he can't escape. And then in that very moment, Nagara's overwhelmed emotional state manifests itself in his superpower and he subconsciously transports everybody to this world. Miss Aki even said at one point that Nagara's power is to, quote, run away. away, and that's why they're stuck in this world now. And while I don't trust anything Miss Aki says during the entire run of the show, I don't think she entirely missed the mark with this comment. Because if the superpowers are manifestations of the essences of the student's character, then this would be a quite on-brand power for Nagara. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked again. At the point when Nozomi first confronts Nagara, Nagara's life is a life of inaction, just letting everything happen without trying to change any of it. Because what's the point, right? But now this girl is trying to confront him and vanquish his sense of purposelessness, and that's a confrontation that Nagara can't handle. Nozomi sees through Nagara's sulky behavior and sees that Nagara is actually secretly hoping for things to improve, just like Hayato says when he confronts Nagara.
お前はいつもそうやって諦めてるふりしてるけど、本当は心の底で何かに期待してるんだ。
Unlike Hayato though, Nozomi sees where Nagara's behavior comes from, or at least has an inkling and wants to find out the whole truth of it, as she always does. She has the idea that maybe Nagara might be struggling mentally and that he doesn't really have anywhere else to turn, and that's why instead of anger, Nozomi feels sympathy for Nagara. She understands him and wants to help him. Another one of my favorite Nozomi-Nagara interactions from the first episode is the iconic sunflower or dandelion scene. Nozomi's leap into the void is an obvious metaphor for jumping into the unknown and detaching yourself from a comfort zone, and how that can open up new worlds for you. And that in and of itself is a great finale to the first episode, but the interaction between her and Nagara that precedes their jump is so simplistically beautiful. I still get goosebumps whenever I watch it. That simple line where Nozomi says, "Then you're just like me," when Nagara says he sees himself as a dandelion, is just so inspiring and heartwarming. She spontaneously gets excited over Nagara's answer because she can give Nagara a different perspective on himself. In a way, she compliments Nagara by saying, "See? You're really not that deadbeat loser you see yourself as. So come on, man, let's leap towards that light." And as we see over the course of the show, he really isn't. He really is that dandelion that keeps pushing on, running and jumping forward towards brighter places. Now, I think it's very easy to interpret Nozomi as a manic pixie dream girl for what role she plays in relation to Nagara especially. You know, she's not like other girls. She has a different uniform. She is positive and optimistic when the rest is negative and pessimistic. She goes against the current. She doesn't follow the mainstream. She doesn't like cell phones, yada yada yada. And I don't think that interpretation is completely incorrect. I mean, I once even analyzed Nozomi and Rajdhani as being a bit of a Mary and Gary Sue, but here's how I think Nozomi differs from that archetype of the romanticized, not like other girls type of women we see portrayed in media all too often. For starters, Nagara doesn't really end up together with Nozomi, despite obviously liking her. Though, despite this, the show ends with Nagara smiling and content, and this is because Nozomi always encouraged Nagara to work on his own character. That's how she helps him. Sure, she first tries to connect to him, but after that, she helps him confront his own flaws. Nozomi encourages Nagara instead of just lending him a shoulder to lean on, or in Asakaze and Miss Aki's case, boobies to cry on. That sounds like a joke, but I'm actually being dead serious when I say that I think that's the perfect counterexample. Asakaze indulges in base desires and unearned, unconditional affirmation and pleasures, while Nagara works on the well-being of his own character to the point that he earns his friends' love and respect conditionally. Nozomi and Nagara's story isn't a love story, it's a self-improvement story, and that's what makes their relationship so beautiful. Nozomi shows Nagara the light, but she doesn't hold his hand and guide him to it. He needs to do that part himself. This is why it's so powerful when in episode 9, when Nozomi is feeling down and defeated, Nagara goes up to her to console her and help her get back on her feet as he thinks to himself,
今度は僕が光を見せるんだ。
Nagara can relate to Nozomi's existential despair, as he was once in the same spot as where she's at now, and at that time, Nozomi helped him out of it, and as a result, Nagara has grown so much that he is now able to return the favor for her. Nagara has regained his autonomy and his zeal for life to the point that he can now be the person for Nozomi that she once was for him. It's such an amazing character development that Nozomi helped bring about, that Nozomi succeeded in. She brought that inner dandelion in Nagara out. She helped that bird fly. I think now is a good time to talk about the two main metaphors SonnyBoy uses, being the flowers metaphor of whether one's character is in line with the traits of a sunflower or a dandelion, and a metaphor of the dying or flying bird. I'm covering these two metaphors in one chapter because I think the essences of both metaphors' meaning comes down to the same thing. Let me explain, starting off with the birds. Throughout the run of the show, there are multiple instances where a crippled or helpless bird is used as a metaphoric conduit to expound on the inner workings of a character, and it's mainly used in the dynamic between Nagara and Nozomi. In a final episode, we see Nozomi finds a weak hatchling bird whose mother is dead, and Nozomi says she'll take care of the bird until it can fly on its own. This is Nozomi's final line in the show, but during the line we see Nagara in close-up, and that's because, just like the bird, Nozomi took care of Nagara until he could fly on his own. Just like the hatchling bird, it's implied Nagara doesn't have any parental guidance that he can count on, and Nozomi knows this. In episode 1, we see a shot of Nozomi's eyes peering beyond the curtain as Nagara and his homeroom teacher talk about this. And in episode 2, when Nagara was about to neglect a dying bird, Nozomi even says,
あの日言えなかったけど、誰かに見捨てられたことが誰かを見捨てる理由になるの。
Now knowing that Nagara was abandoned by his parents, Nagara and the bird are one and the same in a manner of speaking. And per extension, Nagara is the bird Nozomi cares for until it can fly away. That's why the show uses those visuals of birds flying off during Nagara and Mizuho's running sequence, when Nagara is able to make the effort on his own to run, or rather fly, back home. On top of that, the way Nagara interacts with birds over the course of the show directly depicts how Nagara interacts with his own life. At every point in the show, Nagara's attitude towards his own life shifts in sync with how he treats a helpless bird, whether he's apathetic towards it or wants to care about it. The show applies this metaphoric conduit of interacting with a crippled bird to the characters of Nozomi, Hoshi, Kodama, and of course Nagara. When Nozomi comes across a crippled bird, she takes the bird under her wing and fosters it until it can fly on its own. Nozomi wants people to be the best version of themselves, and she'll do anything she can to help. Hoshi, however, is a fatalist, and his reaction to the bird's crippled state is one of acceptance. While he does pick up the bird to care for it, Hoshi decides the bird isn't able to fly anymore and believes that there isn't any hope of it ever being able to fly again. Hoshi accepts what he sees in front of him, and he doesn't make any effort to change it, just like he accepts his life in this world and doesn't believe he or any of the kids will ever go home again. Kodama, on the other hand, uses her magical powers to try and heal the bird, only for it to eventually die. She lets people rely on her for her powers, but in the end, it's ultimately destructive for everyone, including herself, which I'll talk more about in a bit. And then finally, we have Nagara. At the start of the show, Nagara neglects the bird dying at his feet, reasoning that it won't matter whether he'd try to help the bird or not, it'll die anyway. This is of course when Nozomi confronts him about this lame-ass mindset with that quote, "Is being abandoned by someone any reason to abandon someone else?" And as we see at the end of the show, Nagara makes the effort to check in on a bird's nest, making that first step towards caring about life. Then there's the sunflower or dandelion metaphor from that iconic scene at the end of episode 1. As I already explained in the previous chapter, quote-unquote being a dandelion is a metaphor for leaping to brighter places and making the effort to make a better life for yourself. But more than that, it's also a metaphor for getting off your ass and challenging yourself or facing a challenging task. Being a sunflower, on the other hand, then means the opposite of that. Being a sunflower means being unable to move, much like a crippled bird. And this is how the two metaphors overlap. The flying bird can be equated to a dandelion and a dead bird to a sunflower. These metaphors are predominantly used to emphasize Nozomi and Nagara's character dynamic. However, there is one other duo of characters that also make use of these symbolisms, and that is Yamabiko and Kodama, the boy who turned into a dog and the girl he fell in love with. I think the main purpose of the Yamabiko and Kodama plotline in episode 8 is to serve as an exemplary opposite to Nagara and Nozomi's relationship. Whereas Nagara regains his independence through Nozomi's help, Yamabiko transformed into a dog out of pure infatuation for Kodama and his willingness to do or even be anything for her. Yamabiko and Kodama are very comparable to Nagara and Nozomi in a lot of ways, down to the bird and flower metaphors. They're like two sides of the same coin. However, they're also fundamentally different. Whereas Nozomi encourages Nagara to be a better person, Yamabiko keeps entrusting his life and happiness to Kodama, believing she is the answer to everything. And though this weighs on Kodama, she kind of lets Yamabiko entrust everything to her just because she's so powerful. Meanwhile, Kodama is kind of doing the same thing to Yamabiko in a more subtle way. She hopes that one day Yamabiko will take her with him on a journey and that all her cares will be left behind once he does. So she just waits and waits and waits and waits, hoping they'll one day elope together. Kodama is looking at Yamabiko while Yamabiko is looking at Kodama, but neither really ends up helping the other. They're both looking up to each other and are paralyzed in each other's gaze. Inversely, this is why Nagara and Nozomi's relationship is so powerful and almost symbiotic. They're dandelions. They push each other as much as themselves on to brighter places. While Yamabiko and Kodama are both sunflowers, they keep staring at the light in front of them and wither away as a result. As Yamabiko says,
私はただ光を受けていたかった。光を失うことを恐れ、最後まで踏み出せなかった。
In this scene, Nagara talks to Yamabiko about how he's constantly thinking about his past choices and how it irks him that he can't change them anymore. Yamabiko can relate to this, because this way of thinking was his doom. Constantly worrying over things from the past is what made Yamabiko unable to move forward. And even though he eventually broke free, it took him so long to take that step that the light has now faded, and it's now impossible for him to return home ever again. So when Nagara says that he doesn't know if he can take that step towards the light, Yamabiko shows he believes in him and says,
ああ、やれるさ。
And though it may be a small push, Yamabiko knows it's a vital one. This scene quite directly parallels a flashback scene where we see Yamabiko explaining how he's in a constant state of remorse for his actions to Kodama. In this scene, Kodama replies to Yamabiko's regrets that he shouldn't feel bad about what he can't control, or at least what he can't control anymore. It's clear Yamabiko paid much attention to Kodama's words and held her advice in high regard because he consoles Nagara in the exact same way when he feels guilty about sending everyone adrift. Kodama's words to Yamabiko is probably the best summary of the whole Stoic philosophy you can give, and living with that philosophy is a large part of what makes Kodama such a strong character. Much like Nozomi, Kodama's attitude towards life is what makes her as powerful as she is. Over the course of their relationship, Yamabiko becomes more and more enchanted by Kodama, and eventually Yamabiko attaches his emotional state to the state of Kodama, becoming entirely mentally dependent on her, which of course isn't a great position for Kodama to be in. Yamabiko's codependency on Kodama counteractively causes the death of Kodama herself. Instead of developing his own character, Yamabiko is convinced that Kodama is the key to his happiness. This locks him into a state of inaction, and the bird dies. Yamabiko's love for Kodama is incredibly subservient. As he says at one point, he believes more in her than he does in himself. He is her dog. He left everything up to her, even important matters regarding his own life. He even lies to Kodama about how he really feels about her approach to life because he's just that convinced that she'll know everything better than him anyway. This is why Yamabiko puts the responsibility of his own happiness into Kodama's hands and never really changes as a person as a result, which, tragically enough, if he would have broken free from that mentality, he could have prevented Kodama's death. As War himself said, all they had to do to heal the tumors plaguing Kodama and the rest was to resolve the mental wounds manifesting those tumors, and to do that, all Yamabiko had to do was change. But he didn't, so after Kodama dies, Yamabiko is again filled with remorse. He starts with regrets, and because he doesn't change, he ends with regrets. Nagara, on the other hand, works for his own happiness by starting to rely on himself for more and more things, eventually even for the happiness of others. The destructive end of Yamabiko's subservient love is eventually made clear through the visual metaphor of Yamabiko's dream, where Kodama asks him to pinky promise that he'll bring her along to different worlds. And while Yamabiko wants to indulge in this promise, when he tries to reach out his pinky, he sees he has a dog's paw, not a hand, and he cannot promise her such a thing. He cannot reach out his pinky, he cannot fly. Partially by his own fault, and partially because Kodama never encouraged him or taught him how to. As Mizuho says when she confronts So, Nozomi helped and nurtured Nagara until he could stand on his own 2 feet and face the challenges of life by himself, while Kodama kept guiding Yamabiko until the end, never teaching him to fly on his own. Nozomi's bird flies, while Kodama's bird dies. Yamabiko was chained to Kodama like a dog, entirely dependent on her, so when her powers ran out, the bird died. Meanwhile, when Nozomi's quote-unquote powers ran out, Nagara was able to help her on her feet again in return. Quick little sidetrack, when I was yapping to my mom about this bird metaphor of Nozomi and Nagara and Kodama and Yamabiko, while I associated it to relationships, my mom immediately related it to parenting and how you have to teach a child to walk on its own, in a manner of speaking, and a parent's powers run out too. I just thought it was funny to note, because it just goes to show that anyone can relate to the metaphors of SonnyBoy with their own set of issues and life experiences. Anyway, Yamabiko and Kodama both entrusted their own happiness entirely to the other person, ultimately causing for neither of them to achieve it in the end. Just a small tip for anyone who might be in a relationship right now: while it's very fun to be in love, you should always stay in touch with yourself. Never leave the responsibility of your emotional state entirely up to another person. Please, it's not healthy. Not for yourself and not for the person you're codependent on. Speaking from experience as someone who has had another person be entirely emotionally dependent on them, I can tell you, it's not the best. Take care of yourself first, others second. The same counts in the opposite direction. Don't wait for someone else to save you. Another person is not instantly going to solve all your problems. Not really. They are never the answer, whoever they are. Trust me. The only person who can truly help you overcome your struggles is you yourself. In SonnyBoy, Nagara and Nozomi don't end up together as a couple to hammer home this very point. Being in a romantic relationship with Nozomi wouldn't and shouldn't change any of Nagara's hardships, so the story never takes that route. As a result of this choice, the ending of SonnyBoy might feel sad, but it's actually a far happier end to see Nagara smile without needing Nozomi by his side than if Nozomi were to be Nagara's quote-unquote prize for his personal growth and development. Yamabiko and Kodama's relationship serves to tragically highlight how dually destructive these projections can be, as since Yamabiko was completely mentally dependent on Kodama, when Kodama died, Yamabiko ended up being depressed beyond help. After Kodama's death, Yamabiko spends 5,000 years just mourning, simply not knowing what to do with his life now. Kodama was his life. If we look at how Nagara dealt with Nozomi's death though, we see Nagara is just a far healthier person than Yamabiko. When Nozomi dies, Nagara mourns for a healthy while, and then, like a Chad, he gets back up to continue his journey and his own personal development the way Nozomi taught him. And if that sounds too heavy or bleak, just replace dying with breaking up or something of the sort, because that's the point I'm trying to make. And I believe that's the point SonnyBoy is trying to make as well. As I said, Nozomi just challenges Nagara to do better, to be a better version of himself, to be the person that can confront life and all the hardships it may carry on his own and actually does it. Over the course of the show, Nozomi encourages people to just be. She convinces Nagara that it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And it's exactly because Nagara makes this effort to overcome his lackadaisical mindset and effectively change that Nozomi respects him. Nozomi doesn't show Nagara the wonders of the world, or that all life is just a beautiful show and he shouldn't constantly be so bummed out. But just by being herself, Nozomi teaches Nagara to try. Despite how shitty life can get, despite how invisible the light may seem, Nozomi teaches Nagara to just try. The fourth episode of SonnyBoy is probably one of the weirdest out of all of them at first sight, yet it has always been one of my favorites, even back when I understood nothing about it. It's probably also one of the most important episodes out of the whole show, both concerning the character's development as well as thematically as a whole. In this episode, the kids decide to play some baseball for old time's sake. During their game, Nozomi hits a great ball, and suddenly they hear a monkey scream. Cap then excitedly jumps up and tells Nozomi how no one has hit a ball that well since Steroid Monkey. After being met with confusion from the group, Cap starts explaining an entire lore of a monkey baseball league, which is exactly what it sounds like, a league of monkeys playing baseball. When the gang then asks where they can see these monkeys play, Cap says they're playing on the same field as they are, but they're in another this world, so they can't see them. Then Cap starts talking about Monkey Blue, the best pitcher the Monkey League has ever known. Now, I know fuck all about baseball, but from how I understand it, in this Monkey League, there was a season where Blue was on the top of his game, and his his team was winning every match because of his amazing pitches. So before the season was officially over, Blue's team had already won the season. Then in the final game of the season, Blue threw each pitch perfectly and was closing in on a perfect game, and this is where it gets interesting. It was 16-0. Blue had thrown 80 pitches perfectly, which means, quick math, that he had struck out 26 batters and had brought the 27th and final batter down 2 strikes already. If Blue would pitch this final ball in the strike zone and the batter would miss the ball, Blue would achieve a perfect game, which in our entire history of baseball has only happened 24 times. So when Blue is about to throw this final pitch, the entire stadium and even both teams are looking on in anticipation. In Cap's words, there wasn't a doubt in any monkey's mind that Blue would complete this perfect game with this final pitch. Everyone in the stadium was waiting for the hype of seeing that perfect game come to fruition through Blue's magnificent talent. But when Blue throws his pitch, he misses the strike zone by no more than a micrometer, and the umpire calls it a ball, not a strike, meaning that Blue's perfect game was foiled. Blue then starts angrily complaining to the umpire and basically says, "What was the point of that call? We've won the title anyways. This is a throwaway match. The only reason that everyone is still watching this game is because I'm amazing and everyone wants to see me pitch a perfect game." To which the umpire basically replies, "Tough luck, them's the rules." Blue was convinced that because of the fame and prestige his talent had granted him, that he was the rules. He couldn't deal with the commentary or critique anymore, even if it was a literal objective fact that he's in the wrong. Now, when we project this scene onto reality, I think Blue's behavior is becoming a more and more common phenomenon, definitely in regards to social media and influencers. Ever since the rise of social media, there are now more celebrities than ever before, and however amazing these celebrities may seem on our screens, they aren't always the most moral of people deep down. In today's day and age though, when a famous person is caught engaging in unacceptable behavior, we can hold them somewhat accountable through social media. This is why YouTubers and influencers make apology videos after they've done some heinous shit. It's just a means of damage control to their business. They are rarely ever genuinely sorry. They usually just feel sorry for themselves. They feel sorry for getting caught. I mean, try to think back to the last good apology video you saw, where the person in question is genuinely sorry for their actions and explains how exactly they're taking accountability for their mistakes. Not easy, right? I think this phenomenon of celebrities often not really having a sense of guilt or accountability or just conscience stems from that unconditional adoration and positive affirmation from fans. When you're at a point in your life where you as a person have millions upon millions of people constantly cheering you on with literal thumbs ups on everything you do, every breath you take, every fart you make, if you don't keep your feet on the ground and you indulge in all of the parasocial love, at a certain point you can start to actually believe and internalize the idea that any criticism you receive is just simply wrong, that there must be something wrong with the people criticizing you, as opposed to the idea that there might be something wrong with you yourself. SonnyBoy stresses the importance of looking in the mirror and improving yourself. Whenever something goes wrong in your life, look at yourself first. What flaws might you have as a person that caused this to happen? How can you improve as a person to prevent your future from being plagued by the same kind of mistakes? Blue rejects the idea that there might be something wrong with his pitches and blames the umpire, the rules themselves, for being wrong. Blue really believed that he was the rules. He was so loved, so revered, that he believed anything and everything he did was right. And not just Blue, but his fans too. The fans also disagreed with the umpire just because they all wanted to see Blue pitch that perfect game, regardless of what the rules of baseball were. As Nagara says, when the fans stormed the umpire, it wasn't just the umpire that got killed. It was baseball itself that died. People didn't care about the essence and rules of the sport anymore, but just wanted to see their idol, Monkey Blue, pitch a perfect game, regardless of what a perfect game actually meant within the boundaries of the rules of baseball. I think this is the danger of celebrity culture. When the umpire called the ball and Blue got angry, the entire stadium flew into an uproar and charged the field. The fans tore the umpire's body to shreds and stomped and spit on its remains. After all, it wasn't Blue that was wrong, it was this world with its awful, mean rules. Even Cap explains how he's sure of it, that there was nothing wrong with Blue's pitch, it was the world itself that slipped. And that's why Blue missed the strike zone. The entire world just went to the left. It wasn't Blue's fault, and the only person who didn't slip along with the world just so happened to be the umpire. It's moments like these that'll have you start spelling celebrity culture with a capital cult. When celebrities can get to the point of convincing their fans that there never is and never can be anything wrong with them, and if there ever is any kind of conflict concerning themselves, it must always be attributed to the faults of others. Back to SonnyBoy though. After Cap finished explaining the history of the Monkey Baseball League, the kids really want to see these monkeys play. And apparently this kid from their class, Ace, has a flashlight that allows you to see the monkeys. Ace says he'll give them the flashlight on the condition that they hit one of his pitches in baseball. Of course, Ace is a baseball prodigy, so neither Mizuho nor Nozomi managed to hit one of his pitches into the field, and they're both struck out. Then it's Nagara's turn, who already knows how outclassed he is, and he simply stands there not swinging the bat for the first two pitches, just letting the balls fly by him. But then, for the third pitch, and what was supposed to be the final pitch, Ace misses the strike zone. It's actually all kind of similar to Blue's foiled perfect game. However, unlike Blue, Ace doesn't just miss the strike zone by a micron. Ace intentionally throws the ball at Nagara's head out of protest in a fit of frustration. This might be a good place for a quick interjection to talk about Ace, because I think he's the most interesting side character from the show. Ace is a very frustrated character. Back in the original world, Ace was quote-unquote special because he was so good at baseball. There were already pros asking for him. He was going to make it in the big leagues, no doubt. But then he got transported to this world, where baseball is relatively meaningless. There are no big leagues, there are no pros, there are no career and fame prospects in his talent. Ace is obviously a person who let himself be defined by his talent. Now, I already talked at length about this theme in a previous video where I said this.
Your esteem as a person can't be based on what attributes luck grants you. It must be based on the quality of your character.
In that same video, I also say no one should decide who they are based on what they're given, but on what they do with what they're given, and I still stand by these statements. Ace, however, is, as I said, someone who defined himself by his talent, so when his talent is robbed of meaning, he feels like he himself is robbed of meaning. This is why Ace gave baseball to the monkeys. He's trying to inject baseball into this world. He's trying to make baseball relevant and meaningful in this world. He's trying to regain his sense of purpose, not by looking inward and changing the flaws in his own character, but by trying to alter the world around him to be more accommodating to his sense of purpose. This is also why Ace's girlfriend consoles Ace with the words, "This is not where we're supposed to be." This referring to a world where his arbitrary talent feels meaningless. To trace it back to Evangelion again, it's like Shinji and Asuka saying their lives are meaningless if they can't pilot their Eva units. They define themselves by the praise they get from piloting the Eva units, just like Ace defines himself by the praise he gets from playing baseball. As we're shown in Evangelion, these kids need to realize that there's only one thing that truly matters when you look at yourself. The only way you can truly be satisfied with your life, the only way you can begin to find meaning, is by looking at yourself stripped of all worldly accomplishments and feats, and just look at yourself and your relationship to other people. Ace is incapable of this. He forces Nagara to get them back to their world, even if it kills him. He commands Nagara to get them back to the world where his baseball skills have meaning. Of course, Nagara isn't able to just do that, so Ace projects this frustration of meaninglessness onto Nagara, and afterwards seeks guidance from an authoritative figure who is actually nothing but a fake, which I'll get back to. The point shows like SonnyBoy and Evangelion try to make through their characters is that we should imagine a world where we are deprived of our talents, daily activities, work, just all of our worldly time consumptions that reward us with praise or fame or money. Our character needs to be able to exist in a vacuum. We have to be able to be a good presence even when detached from this arbitrary reality we were thrown into. Only then can we start figuring out what makes us ourselves, and only then can we come to the realization that it's okay for us to be here, and can we begin to become a good person. And personally, I know this is not easy, because I myself am falling into a bad habit of defining myself by making these videos, so I am not judging Ace, nor anyone that falls into this bad habit. I am judging the ones who refuse to make the effort to break out of it. But you know who does make that effort, and who eventually is able to complete that search for meaning and satisfaction using nothing but the content of their own character and their relationship to others? The man, the myth, the balding legend, Nagara. You see, after Ace threw that ball at Nagara's head, Nagara gets up and looks at the base below him, and suddenly, for some reason, he sees the umpire lying there, the umpire that was killed. He sees the umpire looking at him, looking at his game. It seems he has a disappointed look on his face. Nagara notices the umpire is missing an arm, and suddenly everything makes sense to him. The umpire never wanted to be an umpire. He wanted to be a batter, just like Nagara is right now, but he couldn't. Still, his passion for the game drew him to participate in baseball in another form, and here Nagara was, living this monkey's dream, and he's just standing still, not even trying. Here Nagara is, given these opportunities this monkey was robbed of from the start, and he is just letting it all fly by, literally. Then Nagara has the epiphany that it wasn't the umpire that got killed when all those monkeys stormed the field and tore him limb from limb, but it was baseball itself that got killed. Earlier, Nozomi asked Nagara if he didn't feel angry for the umpire, and while at first he was indifferent, now he feels it. Nagara faces the pitcher, declares how he sees the truth of how he feels, and he subconsciously changes the world to a baseball field. In the face of everyone, with all the odds stacked against him, he plants his feet, grips his bat, and plans to hit that ball. The only thing that matters in this world right now is this one pitch. A rush of determination runs through him, and in his focus, he changes this world again and again. Ace throws his pitch. The ball speeds towards him. Nozomi cheers Nagara's swing on from the side. Nagara swings his bat and...
Strike! Batter!
I think it's about time we talk about Nagara. Like, really talk about Nagara. I already talked a bit about him in the Flowers and Birds chapter, where I explained how the bird metaphor serves to convey Nagara's character arc, going from not caring about life to caring about life. And though this is a bit of a simplification, in broad strokes, Nagara's journey through the show basically comes down to learning to give a fuck, which in and of itself is a pretty simple lesson. But that doesn't take away from the profundity of the lesson that you should give a fuck, that you should care about life. However, in my view, Nagara's journey isn't just about caring, it's about trying at life. And personally, I think that's a really fucking profound moral, because it's way too easy to just say, ugh, everything is meaningless, nothing matters, we're all going to die anyway. And as I'll expand upon later, SonnyBoy even makes the point that living with that mindset is practically the same as being dead. You see, by the 11th episode of the show, all of the kids of the original class have dispersed and gone on their own journeys through this world, and only Mizuho and Nagara are still pushing on to find a way home. In the 11th episode, however, Mizuho and Nagara get a visit from their friend Rajdhani, who departed a couple months ago to go on an adventure exploring through different D's worlds. However, since space and time is flexible in this world, from Rajdhani's point of view, it hasn't just been a couple months since he left, but 2,000 years. Anyway, the entire episode is basically just the three of them building the ship that'll get Mizuho and Nagara home, but the heart of the episode lies in the two stories Rajdhani tells of two different D's worlds he visited. And while these two little fables are both really creative in and of themselves, what makes them really interesting to me is that I personally think these stories can be viewed as simplified allegories for Mizuho's and Nagara's fatal character flaws. He also tells each story to their respective allegorical counterpart, which solidifies my belief in this theory of mine. line. Mizuho is a girl who's afraid of change and has trouble learning to take care of herself. So Rajdhani tells her a story about a Disworld ruled by a guy who was obsessed with the past. You see, this Disworld looked very much like their original world, as it was more like a big artwork with paintings of their old home world, all illustrated by the master of that Disworld. However, Rajdhani reflects that the paintings were far more beautiful than the reality they were based on. The painter of that Disworld romanticized the past and had a hard time living in the present, which I think is applicable to Mizuho's character theme of feeling like you don't want to or don't know how to grow up. The fable Rajdhani tells Nagara is far more interesting to dissect in my opinion, as it pertains deeply not just to Nagara's character but the themes of SonnyBoy as a whole. If you watch the show, then you know that in this world death doesn't really exist. People can't die in this world, at least not in the way we die in our world. In his fable though, Rajdhani tells of a person that wanted to invent death in this world. This so-called inventor of death was nothing short of rigorous in his determination to invent death, and he engaged in all kinds of experiments in murder and suicide. Whatever it took, he would invent death. It was his life's purpose, and eventually he succeeded. He supposedly invented some sort of electric chair, which he couldn't wait to try out, and in Rajdhani's words, he died with flying colors. Now, in my Megamind video essay, I already talked a bit about the emptiness one can feel after achieving a life goal, where I said this.
Huge goals we spend a large part of our life to complete or achieve are dangerous because the moment you complete them, you might realize you don't get everything out of it that you thought you would. And if that's the case, you can't redirect your mind to anything else because you don't have a goal left to be striving for. You could be chasing something for your entire life and eventually catch up on it and capture it, just to figure out that you are now standing still.
And SonnyBoy adds an extra dimension to that point. Rajdhani explains that after this inventor of death supposedly died, he initially didn't really change, as in he seemed to still be alive and kicking. He did die though, and right after he died, the inventor just stood up and went about his day, content with himself and his invention. And while at first he didn't seem very different from his old living self, gradually the changes became more apparent. Now that the inventor had achieved his goal, he was at peace. He had lost his drive and he didn't feel any need to do anything anymore. He became unbothered by everything, indifferent to life and all else. A person who at first was so passionately determined to challenge the rules of this world themselves now became quote-unquote well-adjusted. I think the show uses this term well-adjusted because the passion of the inventor was a bit evil, and after losing his passion he actually became a better person, but by losing his passion, the inventor had lost himself, and as a result, he died. SonnyBoy equates losing interest in all things and deciding to let life pass you by without really caring for any of it to death. In a way, SonnyBoy makes the argument that at the start of the show, Nagara is a bit dead. But of course, Nagara changes and finds things to care about, like the people around him and his life in general. He goes through that effort to make the steps to break out of his negative mindset, and anyone who has ever gone through a rough period knows how difficult that alone can prove to be, however easy as it may sound. Guy walks into a doctor's office and says, "It hurts when I do this." The doctor says, "Well then don't do that." Sounds like a piece of cake, but sometimes our surroundings, our own character, or just life in general can make it extremely difficult to make that effort to change. Changing as a person is important. It's personal change and growth that gives different facets to our life phases. As the 11th Doctor in Doctor Who said right before regenerating,
"We all change. When you think about it, we're all different people, all through our lives. And that's okay, that's good, you gotta keep moving so long as you remember all the people that you used to be."
In my opinion, changing yourself might be one of the most respectable things you can do, depending on how you change, of course. It's not easy to break old habits or character traits, even when you know they're bad. Changing yourself as a person can mean confronting your flaws, no longer turning a blind eye to your actions that go against your own moral code. It means challenging the aspects of your life that make you someone you don't want to be. And personally, I think that if you're able to change yourself according to what you are like, quote-unquote, deep down, then you are one respectable ass motherfucker. I also think this is exactly why we can't bring ourselves to respect the Roy kids at the end of Succession. Massive spoiler warning for the entire run of Succession, by the way. Anyway, deep down, I do think Kendall Roy, for example, is a good person. With a big fucking asterisk, sure, but there are multiple moments throughout the show where we get little glimpses into his hidden character, where he seems to genuinely want the best for people and those around him. However, it's exactly because he can't let go of the toxic aspects of his life, being the pursuit of the CEO position and the twisted sense of love he feels for his abusive father, that he's unable to grow as a person and always ends up receding back into his most despicable behavior. While it always seems like Kendall is about to break free from the cycle, he eventually always falls back into his toxic desires and keeps indulging in his most harmful wants and needs, and he fails to attain happiness as a result. The head writer of Succession, Jesse Armstrong, has on multiple occasions stated that he doesn't really believe in the change of one's true character. In his view, people's essential selves don't change, and this philosophy runs through Succession at its core. I mean, the show starts with Kendall begging for the CEO position and Roman and Shiv not giving it to him, and the show ends with Kendall begging for the CEO position and Roman and Shiv not giving it to him. Despite all the hardships and the situational changes the siblings have gone through, the siblings themselves have not changed at all. Kendall is still the same self-entitled attention whore he was at the start. Shiv is still the same self-entitled backstabber she was at the start, and Roman is still the same self-entitled racist he was at the start. The final interaction between these kids shows how they have not grown as people at all since the beginning of the show. Their character hasn't developed one bit, and they are still as awful to one another as they have always been, despite their lovely bonding scenes. By the end of the show, the Roy kids all still have the same awful character traits they've always had, the awful character traits their father ingrained in them. And as a result of their inability to rid themselves of their toxicity, they are only capable of hurting one another. And while I believe they're all very aware of this, not once in the entire run of the show do any of these characters try to truly change their toxic behavior. Besides maybe Kendall at some points, but you know, that's a topic for a different video essay. Adventure Time, on the other hand, is a show that emphasizes how change is an inherent part of the human experience. The show makes the point that as our bodies grow and change, our souls change along with them. Brilliantly enough, Adventure Time takes on the appearance of a kid's show just to explain a point about growing up and changing as a person. I say brilliantly enough because it's a point that'll go over your head as a kid, but when you're an adult re-watching the show for the sake of nostalgia, the morality of Adventure Time will hit you that much harder, because now you can relate to the theme of change the show keeps going on about, seeing how you yourself have grown up and everything around you has changed so much in the past years. We humans are surrounded by change. Our world constantly changes. Our environment constantly changes. The people around us constantly change. And most of all, we ourselves constantly change. It's important because it's natural and it's nothing you can stop. The constant state of change causes nothing to ever be the same over time, just like the river of the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, or as a way more profound philosopher has explained.
The shapes are always changing. Changing is their normal state, like us. Even if we're not changing on the outside, we're changing on the inside constantly. There's some stuff about me that I've been ignoring for a long time. I'm afraid of that stuff. But it's part of who I am. As long as I know the shape of my soul, I'll be alright.
Oh, Jake. You really understand SonnyBoy, don't you? You see, SonnyBoy sort of ends up in between these two philosophies. I believe SonnyBoy as a show tries to make the point that change is possible, as well as essential to bettering yourself as a person and your life experience. However, you have to make an active effort to pursue and create that change. Both this world and all the students in this world are literally in an unchanging stasis, and the students have to give everything they've got to bring change into the static nature of this world. Nagara's negligent, uncaring, and conflict-averse nature is what brought him to this world where he keeps getting more and more disconnected from the people around him as time goes by. He has to make a conscious and active effort to go back to his own world and salvage his human connections. I can't stress enough how amazing this character development is. At the start of the show, amidst all the confusion of being transported to a new world and having new superpowers, Nagara just lies on the floor, uncaring about all these literal reality-shaking events. He lets the bird die. By the end of the show, however, Nagara is the only one alongside Mizuho who continued to make the effort to go home, and as a result, he succeeds. Even Rajdhani is surprised at what Nagara turned out to be capable of when he shows him his plans on how to get home. Even he was surprised at what Nagara turned out to be capable of when he really tried, when he believed in himself. In the face of adversity from every direction, Nagara prevailed against his so-called teacher who told them they couldn't go back, against God himself who told them they couldn't go back, against this world and its rules in its entirety. Nagara prevailed and succeeded. To bring the counterexample of Yamabiko back, while Nagara is constantly pushing forward, Yamabiko was in a constant state of remorse, constantly feeling bad about what had happened in the past and not planning on changing anything in the present, or even doing what he can to change things. As Yamabiko says, when he met Kodama and finally had a bright spot in his life, he was so afraid of losing that light that he couldn't reach out and grab it. He's a sunflower, not a dandelion. When we look at our goats, Nozomi and Nagara, however, they're motherfucking dandelions. When they see something shining brighter than themselves, they reach out for it and try to grab it. They try to be that light. During the first half of the show, Nozomi is always the most eager to go home. That eagerness to get back is manifested in Nozomi's superpower, Compass. Nozomi can literally see a light that she believes will guide them home, so she chases after it, despite the uncertainty the journey towards the light might bring. In my favorite scene from episode 5, Nagara and Nozomi are fishing, when suddenly Nozomi sees guardian spirits in the water below and jumps after them. She encourages Nagara to come along and they both dive down. They share a cute scene with beautiful imagery as it turns out the guardian spirits were a bunch of swirling minnows. When they're above water again, Nagara is glad he jumped in and adventured into the unknown, but he asks Nozomi whether she doesn't ever get scared doing stuff like that, to which Nozomi replies that she does get scared and anxious, but that's exactly why she jumps into it. Nozomi doesn't let her fears dictate her actions, and Nagara be taking notes. At the halfway point in the show, however, Nozomi is confronted with the fact that she is dead. During the failed director's cut project, the kids get to see their original homeworld again. However, they have no place in it, and they have to helplessly watch themselves graduate, unable to go back or change anything. Everyone goes looking for their original self, and as they look their original selves in the eye, they try to grapple with this idea that they weren't chosen. Nozomi, however, doesn't find herself. Instead, she sees people crying by her desk and a vase of flowers titled to Nozomi, as well as the most thematically relevant slice of strawberry cake you'll ever see, but I'll get back to that at the end of this essay. Nozomi has died in the original world, and after witnessing this, Nozomi loses her original enthusiasm for going home. I mean, anyone would, right? Why would you want to go through any more effort just to return to a reality where you're dead? The great, all-powerful, constantly optimistic Nozomi turns into a not-so-enthusiastic and unsure companion. That light she saw that shone so brightly, the light that guided the way home, was also her death. Now, I only realized this on my 4th rewatch while writing the script, but after the graduation ceremony and after Nozomi tells Nagara that she died, there's this visual of Nagara opening that exact same door that he was struggling to open in episode 1 during Nozomi's confrontation with him. And right after he opens this door, the credit song starts to play, and we see the characters in their graduation suits again. I wanted to point out this visual because I think it confirms something about Nagara's personal growth we see later on, seeing how this seemingly randomly inserted shot seems to be some sort of reference to that scene on the roof I broke down in the Nozomi chapter. There are multiple little moments where Nagara's growth is very visible. For example, in episode 9, when Nozomi is being cussed out by a romantically frustrated Asakaze for being excess baggage, useless, and a bunch of other ugly things. After Asakaze's incel rant, Nozomi storms out, and Asakaze argues that it would be better if Nozomi just stayed in this world. And who is it that almost instinctively stands up for Nozomi? None other than our boy, our motherfucking man, Nagara. That's goddamn right, man. Nagara. The dude who was lying on the floor uncaring about anyone or anything just 8 episodes ago. That same Nagara is now standing up for someone and declaring that Asakaze can't just make decisions for other people, that people have to arrive at their important life junctures by their own choices. He then even goes outside to console Nozomi and be the person for her that she once was for him. He makes that effort to care. He helps the bird. But But when does this development of Nagara giving a fuck really start? Over the course of the show, Nozomi keeps trying to evoke strong emotions and opinions in Nagara, whether it be about the Empire who prevailed against the world or about the dying bird. And I think in each episode there's at least 1 or 2 key moments that really show Nagara's movement as a character, whether it be jumping after Nozomi in episode 1, rescuing Mizuho's cats in episode 2, or apologizing to Mizuho in episode 3. But I think the one moment that really solidifies Nagara's change as a person is when he swings that bat in episode 4. That's the true turning point of Nagara's character. The moment Nagara actually started giving a fuck. The moment Nagara stopped running away. The moment Nagara made the effort to change. Because that's the moment he realizes it doesn't matter whether he wins. It only matters that he tries. It doesn't matter that he misses the ball. All that matters is that he tried to hit it. At the end of the day, that's the only way you can improve, right? It's like Fooly Cooly. Nothing can happen until you swing the bat. At a certain moment, Mizuho even calls out Nagara for not trying, for not swinging the bat. In episode 3, Asakaze is just generally being a dick to Nagara, and Mizuho asks Nagara why he lets Asakaze treat him like that. She says that she's sure Nagara would much rather punch Asakaze in the nose, and she calls him out for being gutless. And Nagara, being the dismissive wimp that he is at this point in the show, says that he doesn't want to fight Asakaze because he knows he can't win. He knows he'll lose. To which Mizuho replies, because it really doesn't matter. What matters is that you come up for what you believe and think, and that you just try. There's this scene from one of my favorite movies ever, Little Miss Sunshine, that I think beautifully sums up this idea of just swinging the bat. The movie centers around a family going on a road trip to get Olive, the youngest daughter of the family, to a beauty pageant she's competing in called Little Miss Sunshine. The dad of the family always keeps going on about how losing is never an option, even though he himself is failing in his own financial ventures. But because her dad projects this insecurity of failure onto Olive, in a moment of doubt, Olive talks to her grandpa about being scared of losing the beauty pageant.
Grandpa? What?
I don't want to be a loser.
You're not a loser. Where'd you get the idea you're a loser?
Because Dad hates losers.
Whoa. Back up a minute. You know what a loser is? A real loser is somebody that's so afraid of not winning, they don't even try. Now you're trying, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you're not a loser.
Just like the movie Little Miss Sunshine, SonnyBoy tells us that it's okay to fail at things. It's only normal. It's okay if you don't hit that ball. As long as you try to hit it, you're going in the right direction. So if you ever feel like you can't do anything right and you only keep failing and failing, just know that you're already not failing exactly because you're putting in that effort. Personally, I've been in environments where people have made me feel like nothing I did mattered if I wasn't successful. And if you can relate to that, I just want to tell you, that's just simply not true. You don't always have to win. It's okay to lose. It's So Over only exists because there's a We're So Back right around the corner. Because guess what? The wins, the losses, the stalemates, it's all progress. If you're trying to become better, then you're always progressing, even if it doesn't feel like that. The director's cut project may have failed, but to Nagara, it still counted as progress, because the way he got so close to getting everyone home was just yet another show of his resolve, of what he's able to do if he gives it his all. And it only takes Nagara a few more tries before he does manage to get home and succeed in his efforts. So, even if you totally missed that first ball with all the effort you could muster, it's okay, because...
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sorta good at something.
Wow, Jake. You really understand SonnyBoy, huh? It's okay to fail, even when you thought you were improving. Progress is rarely ever linear, but you have to keep trying. And that's really all there is to it. I've always found the 7th episode of SonnyBoy incredibly interesting, and I think it's worthy of its own chapter. This episode takes place right after the director's cut project failed, and all the characters now have to face the difficulty of deciding for themselves what they want to do, now that they've been shown that they are in fact nothing but copies, and that their original selves have already graduated without them. Most of the kids quickly accept the idea that they can't go back to their world, and instead of trying to go back, they try to figure out how they can live their lives here in this world. As Ace says, now that they've graduated, they have to decide for themselves what to do. A lot of the kids decide to go venturing with Hoshi in his arc. Another group decides to stick with Miss Aki. Rajdhani departs on his own personal adventure, and the main characters are still unsure of what exactly they want to do. The episode mainly focuses on Nagara though, because while initially he may not show it, Nagara is probably having the hardest time coming to terms with the events from the previous episode. He blames himself for everyone's misery, yet another parallel to Shinji from Evangelion. And just like Shinji, to a degree he is responsible for it. But as Yamabiko tells Nagara, he shouldn't blame himself because he wasn't in control of his power when he sent everyone adrift. He was just being used by God. Nevertheless, Nagara's final decision on how he wants to continue only resolves after a bit of a detour. At the start of the episode, Nagara finds Rajdhani experimenting on ants, who hypothesizes that within the confines of the terrarium, the ants will eventually start eating each other. In a sudden fit of moral disagreement, Nagara goes to set the ants free. This random act of care of Nagara is really nothing more than an attempt to compensate for how horrible he feels for sending everyone adrift with his power. Then Nagara suddenly sees what he thinks is a bat flying towards an exercise bar randomly standing on this hill. He walks towards the bar and tries to spin on it, but the only reason he gets upright again is because the world itself turns upside down, and Nagara falls into the sky. When he wakes up, Nagara finds himself in the Tower of Babel, where a massive workforce is working on building the tower. A superior worker confronts Nagara, and Nagara doesn't even hesitate in joining the workforce. He immediately becomes a part of the lower class workers, simply out of his will to conform and escape his troubles, to escape that stress of making a personal decision on his future. By working on the tower, he can now just escape the responsibility of dealing with the undeniable change the events of the previous episode brought. Now, I've watched both the Japanese and English dub of SonnyBoy multiple times, and while I think the English dub is near flawless, episode 7 is an episode where a significant bit of meaning gets lost in translation. In the Japanese text of the episode, the expression Soredake is repeated over and over, and it adds a lot of value to the message of the episode. Soredake is generally used as a sentence extension to relativize whatever is being talked about, as if to say it's not that big a deal, but sometimes it's also used as a quantitative measure. I don't really speak Japanese, but from what I've understood in all its translations, the most accurate, globally applicable way to translate Soredake would be nothing more, or that's all. Over the course of the episode, Soredake is said a total amount of 16 times. Yamabiko is the first to say it at the start of the episode when he's consoling Nagara. He shouldn't feel guilty, he was just being used by God. Soredake. Then Nagara falls into the Tower of Babel and we meet Futatsuboshi. Over the course of the episode, Futatsuboshi says Soredake a total amount of 13 times. It's kind of his gag as a character, but I believe there's more to it than that. Futatsuboshi is an average worker in the Tower of Babel who has been carrying stones for over 200 years. Futatsuboshi explains to Nagara that they're building the tower to reach heaven, the way back to their world, and that they're also hunting for treasure on the side. Nagara then asks the all too important question of what the actual objective is, reaching heaven or finding treasure, to which Futatsuboshi replies that they're both the objective. This on its own I think is already interesting to dissect. In this world of labor, there's the grand ultimate goal and the small short-term goals and pleasures. Both are placed on an equal level, coexisting and almost being one and the same. I think the thought behind this is that without the distractions of hunting for treasures, the workers couldn't bear the endless labor of building the tower, and without the shared goal of building the tower, the hunting for treasures would feel meaningless too. The building of the tower exists as a method to give the workers a shared identity, and hunting for their own personal treasures is what gives them a feeling of unique individuality. This supplementary correspondence of daily activity makes for an extremely stable society where the workers don't ask too many questions. They're actually just satisfied with the state of affairs, and that's why Futatsuboshi says Soredake so often. He has no interest in upsetting the status quo and relativizes his entire life by basically saying, this is just the way it is. Soredake is Futatsuboshi Futatsubashi's life motto. In Futatsubashi's case, this relativizing expression almost exudes a feeling of powerlessness against the revolving gears of the world. It feels like a statement that expresses a sentiment of just going with the flow, and I think that idea of just going with the flow is what the 7th episode of SonnyBoy is really trying to talk about. Unlike Futatsubashi, Nagara obviously has a lot of questions. He asks when the tower will be finished, since apparently there's builders here who have been working on the tower for over 1,000 years. He asks why they're carrying the stones downwards, since it seems kind of counterproductive to him if they're trying to reach heaven. Futatsubashi doesn't know the answers to these questions, but more importantly, he isn't even interested in them. They just have to do the work, carry the bricks, do as they're told. That's just how it is. That's all there is to it. Soredake. The dulled brightness of the workers' shirts alone gives you an idea of how long they've been at this without really questioning the way of things. And while Nagara's shirt is still very bright, he is slowly falling into this trap of stable passivity in the face of life. After realizing he can't just leave, Nagara gets more and more settled into this world. In a way, Nagara falls out of his own identity bit by bit, even assuming a pseudonym to avoid the hate directed at him, and he gradually becomes more and more alike to the workers. At a certain point, Futatsubashi even calls Nagara and himself kindred spirits, and in a way, he might be right. At the start of the show, Nagara's life is a life of Soredake. He spends his days lying on the floor, and when the student council suddenly starts enforcing these rules that others don't agree with, Nagara just says that it's no use to worry about it, because it's just the way things are. Just like Futatsubashi, Nagara used to relativize his own life, and now all that development from the past 6 episodes is slowly being traced back. He's just going with the flow again. However, this regression is luckily put to a stop when Futatsubashi and Nagara go looking for the mythical shooting stars. You see, in the Tower of Babel, there's a rumor saying that apparently there's this beautiful room of shooting stars somewhere. The waitress Hime tells Futatsubashi and Nagara how dearly she would love to see that room, and if she were to catch a star, she'd make a prayer that she'd meet a handsome husband when they reach heaven. Just false hopes stacked on top of more false hopes, but I'm getting ahead of myself. After a while of searching for the room of shooting stars, Futatsubashi says it doesn't really matter if they find the room, it just matters that they went looking, because now they can tell Hime about how they went looking for the shooting stars. Futatsubashi continues saying that he knows it's probably all just a bunch of made-up nonsense, but that it's important that they, as simple worker ants, believe in said nonsense, because otherwise they'd have nothing. He even says that he doesn't think any of the workers really believe they'll someday reach heaven. In a way, Futatsubashi is saying that he, just like all the other workers, has simply accepted his life here in this world, as tedious as it might be. When I first watched the show, this whole idea seemed kind of weird to me. I mean, why would you accept this tedious existence if you know it's not going anywhere? But it all suddenly clicked when I saw this video passing which parodied the Japanese work-based lifestyle. In the video, a guy acts out what it's like to go to work in Japan each day, originally being determined and full of life, but gradually becoming more and more frustrated and drained by the endless cycle of constant work. What makes this video so good though is that in the final cut of the video, when he's supposedly been working in Japan for 10 years, he finishes the video like this.
働くこと、それが人生。今日も働いてるだけ。
For so long, I couldn't understand Futatsubashi, how he seemed to just be okay with this hellish life cycle of being ordered around in an arbitrary hierarchy, doing work that seems meaningless and nonsensical. Why isn't he trying to break out of it? But when I saw this video and heard this guy say Soredake at the end, I finally saw it. At a certain point, you just get used to it. You don't care to think about it too much, it just becomes your new way of living. Nagara very nearly falls into this lifestyle of not really caring to get out of this world, the lifestyle of just taking things day by day, stuck in an unchanging cycle, holding on to the belief that one day you might get out, but sort of knowing that you never will, kind of like the green light from The Great Gatsby. Initially, Nagara gets pissed at Futatsubashi for even proposing the idea that they'll never reach heaven, and he shouts that he's not like him, but then Futatsubashi offers him a bug to eat, which in the Tower of Babel seem to be treated as delicacies. Nagara hesitates. Futatsubashi pretends to eat it. Nagara grabs his hand, the bug falls out of Futatsubashi's palm, and Nagara jumps after it, only to realize he still hates the taste of it. But as I said, he might get used to it as time passes. Nagara is slowly becoming more and more accustomed to this life of meaningless work, this life where Soredake is the slogan, and you don't have to think about life too much. But then, something changes. Futatsubashi finds the shooting stars. At least he thinks he's found the shooting stars. But as it turns out, the famous mythical shooting stars everyone keeps talking about are actually predatory worms, using pretty lights to lure in bugs and devour them. And my third time watching this very scene is when it became apparent to me that Nagara hadn't just fallen into any this world, he had fallen into Rajdhani's ant colony from the start of the episode, or at least a metaphorical equivalent of it. The builders are all just actual worker ants, continuing in their labor for no other reason than the stability of the colony, not even considering they might have an individual purpose to pursue. I think this whole episode is kind of what Nozomi is talking about during her monologue in the scene where her and Nagara go fishing. Now, the dubbed and subbed translations of this scene are somewhat different, and I think they add to each other's meanings, so I'm just going to let the dub play over the subbed version.
It's not like people are worth anything just because they were born. That's why we have to find our own purpose, however long that takes. Sure, there's some value in the life we've been given, but if it came bundled with a purpose, we'd be letting someone else decide our fate, and that'd be gross.
I can't help but think this scene is literally about Eren Yeager, the kid who spent his entire life thinking he was born with the purpose to seek freedom, regardless of the lives he had to exterminate to get it. We aren't special just because we're born into this world. We have to find our own meaning, our own purpose, and that's what makes us special. Futatsuboshi is someone who leaves his life's purpose up to someone else to decide, or rather, he leaves it up to the general current. He just does as he's told his entire life and doesn't even consider the options of his own autonomous choices, at least no further than going to look for myths he knows are probably made up to keep everyone functioning within the system. In the end, this life of chasing a false hope dictated by an external force quite literally ends up consuming him. These myths of the shooting stars, for example, when the truth behind it was revealed to him, he was devoured by it, kind of like Plato's allegory of the cave, but instead of being blinded by the light at first and getting used to it after a while, for people like Futatsuboshi to be exposed to reality, to be exposed to the truth means the end of their life. So maybe for people like Futatsuboshi it is prettier to believe in these fake legends. Maybe for people like Futatsuboshi it's better to believe in nonsense, because the reality behind the nonsense is actually kind of disgusting. It becomes all too clear how the people in the Tower of Babel can't handle the truth behind the myths in the scene where Nagara offers Hime one of the worms that people believe are the shooting stars Hime herself so desperately wanted to see. When Hime takes a bite out of one of these so-called shooting stars and tastes it with her own mouth, she immediately spits it out and calls it gross. I think in a way this idea is also applicable to So and Seiji from episode 9, because when Seiji finally achieves this goal of killing his counterpart, which in a way is the same as the workers hypothetically reaching heaven, he actually quite literally kills himself, and he's left with nothing but purposelessness, a gaping hole. After seeing the truth, Nagara proves that he is in fact not like Futatsuboshi. Instead of indulging in fake myths and a meaningless cycle of labor, Nagara has finally made the decision to continue in his determination to go back home, regardless of God saying he can't go back. He literally goes against the current, against the rules of this world. He purposefully gets a bad report from a superior worker and gets sent to Beatnik, the elite in place and the host of this world. Yes, the elite ruling class of this world is called Beatnik. Even in the details, SonnyBoy's brilliance shines through. Anyway, Nagara tells the host of this world that he knows what this world is, and he turns this world upside down for himself. And before he departs, he tells Beatnik to give his regards to Futatsuboshi, because while Nagara did see him getting devoured, he knows that death doesn't work that literally in this world. And sure enough, in a later shot we see Futatsuboshi still carrying bricks, which to me just attests to the indistinguishability of the workers. All the workers are Futatsuboshi in a manner of speaking. After turning the world upside down, Nagara follows the stairs to the top, which is actually the bottom. When he arrives at the bottom, he sees the exercise bar he supposedly fell down from at the start of the episode and the guy beside it, Komori, which is Japanese for bat. In a flashback, we're shown how this Komori practiced stunts just so he could do a perfect spin on an exercise bar. We see Nagara as a child commenting that he doesn't want to exercise spinning because there's no point in being able to do it. And really, the same goes for building the tower. There's not really any point in it. But before I get into that, I just want to take a moment to respect the layers to the creative choice of Komori Komori's character design. Komori is a bat, which obviously bats hang upside down. But he's also an umbrella, which you also hang upside down. But that umbrella is sometimes also drawn like a bat flapping its wings. It's just so mind-bogglingly creative. On top of that, the whole hanging upside down thing is in turn completely metaphorically in sync with the Tower of Babel. You see, Komori explains that Babel isn't a tower, but a pit, and that this is the bottom. He used his power to lock up the hope of reaching heaven into this light beside them. So really the builders are building upwards, but they're never going to reach heaven. Not just because they're literally moving further and further away from the light that is the hope of reaching heaven, but because the very idea of heaven itself isn't real. It's just an idea locked into a light. So the hope is futile, but the futility of the hope doesn't even matter, because that's not really what's important to the workers. The workers don't really care whether they'll ever reach heaven. They don't care whether they'll ever get back. Unlike Nagara. At the start of this chapter, I said the word Soredake is said a total amount of 16 times throughout the episode. Once by Yamabiko and 13 times by Futatsubashi. Now, if you do the math, that still leaves 2 Soredake said by another character. And the character who says the final 2 Soredakes is none other than Nagara himself. The first time Nagara says Soredake is in response to Rajdhani's parting gift, which is the furball they got from conquering the monkey baseball this world. When Rajdhani says that he found out what the power of the furball was and explains that its sunshine smell will never go away, Nagara replies asking, relativizing this seemingly useless power. But as we'll see later on, this power isn't a matter of Soredake at all. This power is probably the most important out of all the holdovers' powers. Eventually, after Nagara escaped the Tower of Babel, Nagara, Mizuho, Nozomi, and Asakaze all sit by the fire. Asakaze is urging them on to come with him and Miss Aki, but Nagara has finally made his own decision and rejects this proposition. Nagara still wants to get home, and he will persevere in his effort. He's not giving up. And he finishes this declaration of determination with a solid Nagara wants to live his life going down his own path. That's all there is to it. Nothing more. And that's what makes his character so commendable. Where Yamabiko's Soredake is one of consoling, Futatsubashi's Soredake is one of acceptance and most importantly, relativizing his own life. But you shouldn't relativize your own life. Your life is a big deal, and Nagara has realized this. Nagara's Soredake is one of taking the power to shape his future into his own hands. Nagara has made the development from letting life pass him by to shaping his life according to his own will, even if it means going against the current, against the rules of this world, against God himself and all his lies. Now, I'm not really religious, so talking about God and following God falls a bit out of my wheelhouse, but despite the step out of my comfort zone, it's a topic SonnyBoy brings to the forefront on multiple occasions, so I feel a certain obligation to include a chapter on it. And besides, I don't really think SonnyBoy is commenting on God itself, but more the concept of God and the beliefs surrounding it. On top of that, I do believe that you can say God generally finds itself in our daily actions, whatever rules our day-to-day lives. After all, God is change. SonnyBoy's portrayal of God is unique to say the least. In a way, it's God who's responsible for all of the students' misery, but at the same time, he's not really an antagonist because he isn't really purposefully trying to torture the students. He just does things, and the students suffer as a result of it. Now, of course, this goes back to that age-old statement saying that if God is all-powerful, then he can't be all good. And if he's good, then he can't be all-powerful. Or, put more eloquently by the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus, is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? But there's something that all these questions fail to consider, and that is the possibility that maybe God just doesn't care. This is a thought that Burnham voices through his song From the Perspective of God.
You're not going to heaven eat 1,000 crackers, sing 1,000,000 hymns. None of you are going to heaven. You're not my children, you're a bad game of Sim.
It's a great song, but I think Bo phrased it even more efficiently in the final line of the unreleased beta version of this song, where he sings, "You'd think I'd kill you people, you ask me why would a child die? Why would I kill someone when 100 years passes when I blink my eyes?" God might be good, he might be evil, he might be omnipotent, he might not be. But chances are that God might just be indifferent, and that seems to be the angle SonnyBoy takes as well. However, God's indifference in SonnyBoy doesn't go paired with passivity. On the contrary, God does all these weird random things that if he weren't God, you'd scream in his face, "Why the fuck would you do that?" But because he's God, his actions aren't really questioned and everyone just goes along with them. God uses Nagara and gives him this power to send the kids adrift, but it's not God who's blamed for this, it's Nagara. And besides, it's not like God did this out of malice, he just did it for no particular reason at all. There's this Netflix show called The Society, where a bunch of high schoolers also get sent adrift in their own way. They depart on a high school trip, but for some reason they arrive back at their own hometown. Only the town is suddenly completely surrounded by a forest, and all the other town residents are gone. So now these kids need to build their own society, title drop, in this town. The similarities between the society and SonnyBoy only go so far, but as the kids in the society try to grapple with the scary uncertainty of their situation, the show also calls that same verdict of God's cruel indifference.
I keep thinking that God's punishing me.
Why do you think it's about you?
I don't know, I just do.
There's this line from a play I like. It goes, I don't think God punishes people for specific things. I think he punishes them in general for no reason. It's life, right?
I will never forgive Netflix for canceling this show. Anyway, I looked up which play Grizz was referencing with this quote and found an article that said he's referencing the play The Marriage of Bet and Boo, which is about the chaotic misery of life's cruelties, but asks the audience to find absolution from the pain through laughter, which I think is extremely applicable to what the kids go through in SonnyBoy. They're tortured by the meaninglessness of this world that God has thrown them into, but as Rajdhani says, in the absurdity of this world, sometimes cool things do happen, and that's why he can get by. The real evil of SonnyBoy's God lies in his tendency to constantly lie, or at least tell half-truths. One moment he says the kids can't go back to their world, then he tells Nagara there's still time. One moment he's sitting in a wheelchair, the next he's giving a standing ovation for the kids' graduation. The show SonnyBoy is riddled with lies, to the point that you kind of have to decide what the truth is for yourself. SonnyBoy's God is a real pathological liar, and his lies are probably one of the main causes of confusion for the characters. Just for reference, the only other character that lies this much and keeps saying direct contradictions for the sole purpose of deception is none other than War himself. I've mentioned War before in this video, but I think this is the best place to go a bit in depth on his character. If you haven't watched the show, but for some reason made it to this part of the video, War is an actual character in SonnyBoy. Like, he's an actual dude called War. But his personality is very reflective of the concept of war, so his character can be read into metaphorically in multiple different ways. We only really see War appear in 2 episodes. The first time we see War is in episode 8, when Yamabiko is telling Nagara and Mizuho his story. It's instantly made clear that War is a very deceptive person. In his very first appearance, we see him suffering gravely from the virus of carbuncle tumors, and he tells Kodama he thinks she's ugly. But the next time we see him, he's completely healthy, and he explains he actually thinks Kodama is beautiful and only told her she was ugly because he wanted her to like him. Now, interestingly enough, the reason War lies like this is because he wants to be liked, and initially it works. Kodama originally says she wants to take care of him even if he was the one that brought the tumors with him, because he was nice enough to be honest to her and tell her she's ugly, something that Yamabiko wasn't able to do. Ironically enough, it turns out that War was lying when she told Kodama she was ugly just so she would like him. He was playing her. War so desperately wants to be liked that he tries everything to get the approval of Kodama. The problem is, he's literally the personal manifestation of War. So when he tries to win Kodama over, he does it by giving her all these shiny bright medals. Only the medals are rewards he got for killing people, so Kodama is obviously disgusted by it. After Kodama's rejection, War starts cussing himself out in a pathetic incel rage. However, I can't help but feel a bit sorry for War. I mean, he can't help that he's literally War. Those medals he got for killing people are his art, and he's proud of them. They're his life's work, and they're all he has. But I think all War really wants is just a friend. And that's what's so sad about him. When Kodama initially recoils from him, he even desperately says, "Please don't be afraid of me." Just like everyone else, he's so desperate for connection. But because he's War, he's fated to never be loved. I don't really have much of a personal analysis on War, though I think there's definitely a lot to be said about him. I mean, the shiny pretty medals you get for killing people are obviously a very on-the-nose metaphor for some things I won't get into in this video, though I think you can draw your own conclusions. But something I have noticed is that War's character and all the evil he brings only exists in relation to other people, which would of course make sense because he's War. For example, the scar art virus he brings to Kodama and her followers. The only reason that War was able to kill Kodama and all of her followers was because of Yamabiko's power to materialize what was in his mind. War just brought another Disworld that manifested Yamabiko and the group's mental turmoil into physical ails. This is why the dialogue throughout the episode is so ambiguous. For example, when someone from the group says, "If only he weren't here. He's the one who brought this virus here. If only we killed him from the start." It could be interpreted as being both about War or Yamabiko, because in reality, they're both the cause. War wouldn't have come to this world if it weren't for Yamabiko, and Yamabiko's inaction indirectly brought death upon everyone. The second time we see War, the cast isn't even really sure if he's actually War, and that's because he's become empty. He's just a falling empty husk, the echo of a person, purposeless, not quite dead, not quite alive, just in a continuous fall, never hitting the ground. There's so many metaphorical interpretations of this, but I really don't think that my own are good enough to include in this video. However, I will say that I think this emptiness of War is linked to the emptiness of Miss Aki's War. We constantly see Miss Aki training these kids for the battlefield, receiving these medals of honor and everything. But what are these kids even preparing for? There is no one else in this world besides other castaways. Miss Aki just made up the idea of a war to make these kids easier to manage. There is no war, and that is why there is no war, if you know what I mean. Now, why did I wait for the God chapter to talk about War? Well, besides the obvious reasons. It's because in this world, War's ultimate goal was apparently to kill God, which I think is so interesting. Because while War is kind of an irredeemably bad guy in this world, it's easy to forget that he, just like everybody else, is just another castaway student, thrown into the torturous vices of this world by God. And War thinks the easiest solution to this lonely misery is to kill God himself. After all, he's the one who assigned this identity of War to him. Of course, as Nagara comments, killing God wouldn't really change anything. As I said, God is not an antagonist. He's more of a joker, playing with everyone's fate as if it's all a game. Or should I say, playing with everyone's faith as if it's all a game. After all, it's those very lies of God that are ultimately the main reason why everyone stays stuck in this world. So instead of killing God, a better way to get back at God, to quote-unquote win against God, would be to call him out on his bullshit and go against his lies by just making your own decisions, the way Nagara does. Hoshi, on the other hand, is someone who constantly believes God's words. He believes in his visions and accepts them as the future. That's why he keeps saying they can't change the future, that the future has already been decided, and that they just have to accept their life here in this world. That's why when Hoshi is told about a savior, he builds an ark to carry them to other these worlds and save everyone's lives. He doesn't believe that this prophecy of a savior might refer to someone who could take them all back to their world. He trusts in the word of God and his visions. And who wouldn't?
God is generally believed to be the figure of undeniable wisdom and absolute power. It's not dumb of Hoshi to believe him. The only thing Hoshi failed to take into account is that God might just be saying random shit, and that he doesn't necessarily know what's best for everyone, and even if he does, he maybe doesn't really care. God is literally just yapping. As a result of this passivity in the face of fate, all of Hoshi's visions and everything God says to Hoshi all become self-fulfilling prophecies, as I said before. It's only when the kids arrive at the gateway to other dimensions that Hoshi sees that God was just playing him, and that maybe they can get back home. And so he joins in the gang's effort to get everyone home. But when God just repeats to him that they can't go home because they're copies and weren't quote-unquote chosen, Hoshi immediately believes him again and instantly gives up the effort to return home again. Luckily, we do get a beautiful moment between Hoshi and Nozomi where Hoshi confesses he shouldn't have been listening to that voice in his head all this time, but instead he should have been listening to the people around him. Though most of Hoshi's predictions and prophecies end up coming true, the one prophecy that was prominently brought up throughout the show but never came true was the prophecy of a savior. At the end of episode 3, Hoshi hears God talking about a savior, and over the course of the next 3 episodes there's a ton of discussion about who that savior could be. Originally, people think it's Nagara because he has the power to travel to different worlds, and everyone thinks this means he can get everybody home. Then Miss Aki convinces everyone it's Asakaze because of his great powers. But Hoshi believes his arc to be the savior because it will guide and protect everyone in their journey through this world. And I think the reason there never ended up being a clear singular savior was exactly because everyone was in disagreement over who exactly the savior is and what exactly they were getting saved from. The role of savior can only be appointed to someone when there is a shared belief that there is something to be saved from. In the case of Asakaze and Hoshi, they might have actually been a savior to some people, depending on what people thought they needed saving from. But Nagara, who's the only one who we actually see succeeding in why people originally called him a savior, isn't a savior at all because he didn't take anybody along with him when he went home. Everyone had abandoned the hope that he could get everyone home after the director's cut project failed, so he ultimately only ends up being able to save himself and Mizuho. After the director's cut project fails, the group definitively splits itself into 3 groups. There's those that follow Hoshi in his arc, there's also Nagara, Mizuho and Nozomi who persevere in their determination to go home, and the final group consists of those that follow Miss Aki and accept their fate as has been proclaimed by God. After episode 6, Miss Aki kind of replaces Hoshi as a messenger of God, claiming she speaks on God's behalf and everything. We don't really know who Miss Aki really is. The only thing we know is that she definitely isn't Miss Aki. Not only because Yamabiko says that students are the only ones who can go adrift, but also because the way Miss Aki acts in this world is completely out of character from the little glimpses we get of the real Miss Aki from their original world. My personal theory is that this is just a student with the power to shapeshift into other people, so they just assume the identity of a hot teacher because it gets them the authoritative respect as well as big boobies, which she can both use to manipulate the students. After all, the students are all just lost kids, suddenly dropped into a world without leadership, where they have to make their own decisions. This endless freedom of this world is obviously scary, so when a person comes along who not only appears to be an adult teacher, but also claims that it was God himself who sent her to guide them, it's no wonder that a lot of the students fall for that facade of confident leadership. It's the same way that cults and dictatorships come about. In a time of crisis and uncertainty, whether on a personal level or a societal one, in SonnyBoy it's both cases, when a seemingly strong authoritative figure or a community appears, people will often want to fall in line. When you just put your faith in the person who claims they can solve your issues and overcome the crisis, you don't have to think much for yourself anymore. You just have to have faith in the leader, faith in the system. Soredake. Miss Aki, or rather the person pretending to be Miss Aki, preys on this fear and insecurity of the students, and she establishes herself as a leader, even though she is most likely just as lost as all the other students and probably knows just as little about this world as them. She doesn't have all the answers, but she pretends that she does, and the naive students who want to believe her fall into her dictatorial leadership that gradually becomes more and more war-focused. Now, obviously there are many possible interpretations of SonnyBoy, definitely when it comes to what SonnyBoy has to say about religion, and I'm not going to discredit anyone else's interpretations of this show, but personally, as someone who doesn't really believe in a god as
described in any religious text or story present, Miss Aki's character really got me thinking how fucking weird it is for people like Jesus or Abraham or Muhammad to just straight up claim that they've been sent by God or have heard the word of God and are acting according to his will, that they have a direct relationship to God, and that God specifically gave them a mission to guide the people to a holy salvation that only they know about. And don't get me wrong, Jesus and Muhammad might have been great guys. I personally haven't had the chance to talk to them. But Miss Aki definitely isn't a nice woman. She invokes the word of God for the sole purpose of manipulating these impressionable students and bending their actions to her will. What I find interesting though is that by episode 10, it seems that Miss Aki does seem to have some sort of direct relationship with God, as he assigns her and Asakaze with the mission of killing war, which is ironic because it's Miss Aki herself that's transforming these classes of lost students into an organized army. I'll get back on this specific mission in a bit, but when it comes to this relationship between Miss Aki and God, I'm inclined to think that it happened inversely, in a fake it till you make it type of way. Miss Aki kept saying she was speaking on God's behalf, and everyone believed her. So, as a result of the power and respect she received from being believed to be someone who speaks with God's own approval, she inversely made herself into an acquaintance of God. It's because everyone believed she was associated with God that she effectively became associated with God, and her power was legitimized. It's like Paul Atreides from Dune. It's because everyone believes he's the Messiah, or rather the Lisan al-Gaib, that he actually becomes the Lisan al-Gaib and gets all the power that entails. I don't know if everything the stories say about Muhammad or Jesus are true. I don't know if they are actually envoys of God. But because the stories are believed to be true, because they are believed to be associated with God, they are now undeniably associated with God, even if only conceptually. In Misaki's case, this direct relationship between her and God is very dangerous because she's so manipulative. She keeps preaching about the end of the world and orders the kids on what they have to do to prevent it. And of course, everyone wants to prevent the end of the world, so of course they're going to do what she asks. She tells Asakaze with his incredible power that he's the chosen one, the one who will save this world. And because Asakaze falls for her manipulation, she makes his power her own. After all, Asakaze is nothing more than his power. Asakaze is the type of character that I like to call a sympathetic dickhead. He's not a villain, he's just a prick. But at the same time, you kind of feel for him in a weird way. The reason Asakaze gets on your nerves is because he believes he's as good as his powers are. Everyone reveres him for his powers, and he lets that adoration dictate his self-image, much like Ace does with his talent for baseball. Asakaze starts thinking of himself as better than everyone else. In his words, the difference between him and his peers isn't just like apples and oranges, but more like a toilet bowl and its thirds. As I've mentioned before, I've also gone in depth on this theme in my Megamind analysis, and I think characters like Ace and Asakaze are extremely comparable to characters like Metroman or even Teruki Hanazawa at the start of Mob Psycho 100, but I think I've already said enough about this character team, so I don't intend to spend too much time on it anymore. What's brilliant though is that SonnyBoy itself actually doesn't waste too much words on this theme. Instead, the show efficiently breaks down this entire character flaw in the very first episode through just a couple lines from Pony, the original student council president.
何笑ってる?
面白いなと思って。は? そりゃ嬉しいよね。突然すごい力が手に入っちゃったんだから。今まで冴えなかったもんね。
なんだと。
でもさ、それって現実じゃ通用しない力だよ。しかもさ、あんたの実力でもなんでもない。Yet
again, in just 6 lines, SonnyBoy accurately breaks down an entire introspective character theme that other brilliant movies spend their entire runtime to analyze. Brevity truly is the soul of wit. The irony of Asakaze's character is that while he probably has the most powerful superpowers out of everyone, he's actually the weakest character in all the ways it really matters. He constantly gets outshined by Nagara, he gets manipulated by Misaki, he doesn't even have the strength to be truthful, not even to himself, and ultimately he doesn't even have the strength to go back home. As a result of Asakaze constantly receiving love from every direction and no one ever opposing him in any way, he actually starts believing that he's worthy of unconditional love and praise. The flip side of this mindset is that he easily gets frustrated by any form of criticism. You see how the monkey baseball episode is probably the most thematically important episode? Asakaze is literally monkey blue. He starts expecting immediate affection from all sides, and when someone turns him down in any way, he thinks there must be something wrong with the person that turned him down as opposed to himself. Instead of looking at himself to face his own flaws, he projects all his shortcomings onto others. He literally even blames cats for being dumb when they don't instantly give him affection. His frustration with rejection is most prominent in his relationship with Nozomi though. Asakaze has a very one-sided crush on her, and he can't understand why Nozomi doesn't like him back. In his view, he's the knight in shining armor, responsible for saving everyone from the deadly terrors of this world. However, Nozomi just sees him as a douche that feels entitled to adoration exactly because of how he views himself. Personally though, in a way, I still feel for Asakaze. He loses himself so deeply in the superficial love that this world offers him, and as a result, he gets trapped in this world, literally becoming unable to face reality anymore. At the end of the show, Asakaze stands before Nagara and Mizuho as they're about to go back to their world, and it seems like Asakaze has the option to come along. Asakaze mentions how everyone is gone now. Everyone has passed away, at least in the abstract forms that this world lets people pass away. Everyone has left him, and he has nothing left in this world. It's all due to the consequences of his own actions, and the logical solution to his torment would seem that he'd go along with Nagara and Mizuho back to reality. But he doesn't. He can't. He can't do it. He stays there. He stays in this world that made him feel so special. What makes this decision even more tragic is that in the real world, he's actually really close with Nozomi, the only one whose affection really matters, the only one whose affection is truthful and real. On the other side of this world, there is real value, but Asakaze can't let go of this illusion of value inside this world. In this world, Asakaze has been given this amazing superpower which at first glance seems to look more and more like omnipotence, but upon closer inspection, it's more something like a trivial omnipotence. He has the power to control the tides, the weather, the literal physical composition of this world, but when it comes to things that actually matter, like getting home or saving people, he can't do jack shit, and he's ultimately powerless. I think the perfect episode to study Asakaze's character is episode 10. In episode 10, Asakaze, Nozomi, Misaki, and Kasetsu, the girl who can read minds and has a crush on Asakaze, go on a trip together. The reason for this trip is that God has assigned a mission to Asakaze to kill War, a person who, according to God, poses a threat to the existence of this world. Of course, due to the static nature of this world, death doesn't exist in this world. Therefore, God gives Asakaze the task of inventing death in this world. When the group eventually finds War though, they see he's nothing but an empty husk, endlessly falling into an abyss with no goal, no purpose, not even any thoughts, as Kasetsu confirms. They start doubting whether this guy even really is the infamous War they've heard so much about. Nozomi then confronts Asakaze, saying that it's extremely entitled of him to think he can just invent death. Asakaze wants to know how she knows about his secret God-given quest, and Misaki tells Asakaze that Kasetsu can read minds, implying she must have told Nozomi about it. This flusters Asakaze beyond embarrassment because he realizes this means his true feelings are on display, how he really feels about himself, as opposed to how he wants to come across. Instead of facing this exposure, Asakaze first retreats back into that unconditional affection, Afterwards, he does muster the courage to face Nozomi though. Nozomi then explains she could never be in love with Asakaze because he lets this praise he constantly receives dictate his self-image. He can't disconnect his self-image from his public perception, and he doesn't even think of making up his own mind on his character by himself. Unlike Asakaze, Nozomi accepts herself for what she is. She's dead. Nozomi also realizes it's no longer a matter of making an effort to change the future for her. She's already seen the reality of her death. That reality is set in stone. And still, she is ready to face that reality, because that's just the way it is, and nobody can change it. Only after Asakaze realizes his feelings are on display to Nozomi, and Nozomi explains the reason she turned him down, does Asakaze decide to stop pretending and try to accept himself for who he is too. He accepts the essence of his person, despite how he might be treated or what people might think of him. He is not an omnipotent force worthy of everyone's admiration. He's an angsty teen who needs to work on his manners. After this confession, Nozomi decides it's time for Asakaze to conquer this world by ridding it of war. She preempts this proposition by saying this is goodbye, since she'll now be joining Nagara and Mizuho in their journey home, even if that entails her own death. Asakaze steps up to War and quits his fall. War is dead now, and the only thing he leaves behind is a gun, the essence of War's character. Asakaze goes to inspect this holdover when suddenly...
Nozomi!
たく。心の奥底は自分でも覗けない。
ちょっと、Asakaze君！
俺、どうして。偶然に生まれる能力の結晶。美しいと思わないか。
Without warning or clear reason, Nozomi dies. But why? How? Why, if Asakaze was so all-powerful, could he not save Nozomi simply from falling? The cliff is a wound in the world, a wound in which War is falling. Only by stopping his fall does War end. Even when he's sitting on the cliff, he is still falling. But he is empty, ambitionless. Who knows for how long he's existed in this world? When Asakaze stops War from falling, the holdover of the world is a gun. Is it that very gun that killed Nozomi? Then Asakaze did achieve the never-done-before thing of killing someone in this world, just like God, the principal, said he would. Does he reject Nozomi's idea of bettering himself for the approval of God and his satisfaction in this world? Nozomi turns into a compass. Those are my unedited notes from the first time I tried to analyze the reason behind Nozomi's death during my second watch-through. Now I obviously have a more nuanced opinion and personal explanation for Nozomi's sudden death, yet still, I think there are so many different ways you can read this scene, and I don't know if I want to claim any one of my own as the quote-unquote correct one. Maybe Nozomi does die by the power of the gun, War's holdover. The scene cuts to God shooting the gun and remarking that Nozomi's death is, quote, the fruit of a spontaneous power. And that is what death is, I guess. Spontaneous. God then also calls it beautiful, which would make sense because to an out-of-touch immortal all-powerful being, the concept of death might actually seem beautiful, though we ourselves know better. The imagery suggests that it's the shooting of this gun that does the killing, so maybe Asakaze did just accidentally use this gun, and as a result of that, maybe he himself killed Nozomi. Or maybe Asakaze's accountability in Nozomi's death is way more indirect. Asakaze succeeded in creating death in this world. He killed War. But since Asakaze now invented death in this world, Nozomi no longer has any excuse to still be alive in this world. After all, Nozomi is already dead in the real world, and Asakaze now created death in this world too. Maybe Nozomi suddenly dies because as soon as this invention of death is brought into this world, it immediately catches up with all its customers from the real world. Asakaze succeeded in creating death in this world. He killed War. But since Nozomi is already dead in the real world, and Asakaze now created death in this world, her stasis of life was unlocked and she died in this world too. Or maybe death really doesn't exist in this world, but Nozomi dies by literally falling out of the world, into the wound of this world. And that's why Asakaze's powers were no use in trying to save her. She was outside the domain of his powers, and the rules of this world didn't apply to her anymore. Or maybe there wasn't any reason at all. Death is a major theme in SonnyBoy, and it comes to the forefront in several episodes. In fact, from episode 6 until episode 11, there's always at least one character death shown per episode. In episode 6, Nozomi is revealed to be dead in the real world. In episode 7, Futatsuboshi gets eaten alive. In episode 8, Kodama and her followers die to the Scar Art virus. In episode 9, So and Seiji kill each other, or rather So Seiji commits ego death. In episode 10, Nozomi dies in this world, and in episode 11, Rajdhani talks about the inventor of death who used his invention of death on himself. The funny thing is, this makes absolutely no sense because death is supposedly invented by Asakaze in episode 10, but in episode 11, it's supposedly invented by an entirely different person with an entirely different story. And in episode 6 through 9, there's all these other deaths before death was even quote-unquote invented. So what's the deal? Well, I could go into an entire analysis and try to explain theories about why some of those other cases aren't really deaths, or I could go even further and delve into a theory of mine about how Hoshi, War, and the inventor of death Rajdhani talks about are all the same person. But I don't really think that analysis is good enough to go in depth on, and besides, this video essay is long enough as it is. I've already talked at length about how SonnyBoy compares being indifferent towards life to death, and how the show expounds on this message through both the fable of the inventor of death that Rajdhani tells Nagara, as well as the bird metaphor relating to Yamabiko and Kodama. While Nagara eventually learns to take care of the bird, Yamabiko and Kodama's bird ends up dying. As I explained, the reason for the death of this bird is indirectly due to Yamabiko's inability to respect his own autonomy. Yamabiko lets Kodama dictate his life, even when she asks him to take her along to visit all the different worlds that Yamabiko has been to, regardless of how awful they may be. But because Yamabiko stays put and doesn't make his own choices in life, the bird dies. In this way, SonnyBoy loudly voices the opinion that inaction is a form of death. So instead of letting the flow of things passively decide your life routines, you should celebrate your autonomy in life. Your subjective experience of life is a beautiful thing indeed. You get to decide the things you want to do, the person you want to be, the joys you want to chase. You shouldn't live a life of, that's just the way it is. You shouldn't live a life of Soredake. You shouldn't just go along with things without thinking just because you're told to do so, even if it's the very rules of this world, even if it's the will of God. Because when you dismiss your freedom to shape your own life trajectory, you dismiss your freedom to live as a whole. That's why Yamabiko can't go back to their world after all. He spent 5,000 years in mourning, being completely static. If he would have never found the strength to awaken, he might have just become one with the forest, just like what ultimately ended up happening to Rajdhani, which brings me to Rajdhani's explanation of death in this world. In episode 11, Rajdhani has a whole monologue that over the 2,000 years he's been alive, he's slowly growing more apathetic towards life, and that despite his stasis in life, he's being drained by time, and eventually he'll turn into a mere shape. Nagara comments on this that that's exactly the same as death, or rather what death means in our world, and he's completely right. Let me explain. When Nozomi dies, she leaves behind a holdover in the form of a compass. In the chapter of These Worlds, I talked a bit about these holdovers these worlds leave behind. They're basically like physical manifestations of these worlds. Now, in the case of people, there's also these holdovers people leave behind after they die. Those holdovers are basically like a physical manifestation of a person's personality or character. And I feel like you can interpret these personal holdovers as something you literally leave behind after dying, kind of like your legacy. What kind of effect on people's hearts will you have after you part from them? How will people remember you? And what kind of influence will you have on their lives when you're no longer a part of it? Nozomi turns into a compass, Rajdhani a forest, War a gun. What would you turn into if you'd pass? A gun or a compass? After the end, that's what matters. Will your mortal actions have led to discord or guidance? Nozomi was obviously a compass, always wanting to get out of this world and go home, always wanting to guide her friends home along with her. So after Nozomi dies, Mizuho and Nagara take Nozomi's compass and continue in their effort to go back home. A bit of Nozomi's spirit is left behind in theirs, and that's why they can eventually reach the light. However, before that, Nagara and Mizuho do something truly amazing that always manages to bring me to tears. Before going home, before setting off, what do Nagara and Mizuho do? In this world completely devoid of all meaning, they hold a funeral. They hold a funeral for Nozomi. They choose to put their venture on hold and take the time to honor their friend who passed in this world. And in a way, they honor the time they spent in this world by doing so. Nagara and Mizuho organize a proper funeral and even invite their former classmates, despite the distance in space and time that has grown between them. They make a pretty tent and have a nice dinner. They put up direction signs and set up Yamabiko at the entrance for checking the attendee list. Nagara and Mizuho probably know no one is going to show up. I mean, who knows how much time has passed for the others and how far away they even are. Yet still, they hold the funeral. Because while the funeral is obviously about Nozomi, in a much more real sense, it's about Nagara and Mizuho themselves. It's about staying in touch with their humanity in this inhuman world, something all the other kids obviously weren't able to do, or didn't care about doing anymore. Reality, life, death, it all ultimately just ends up having the meaning you yourself assign to it. That's why they put up the signs. That's why they have a moment of silence before they eat. That's why they put up this little altar with a photo and a box of items that remind them of Nozomi. Because it matters to them, and this is their way of honoring and immortalizing their friend. But then, after having sent off Nozomi and the two of them prepare to continue on their journey, who is it that suddenly comes to meet them? Who is it that comes from deep out the forest? Which familiar face comes to visit them to offer his emotional support? That's goddamn right. Who else but the boy, the man, the myth, the bimillennial legend, Rajdhani. This man traveled all the way across this world just to offer his condolences to Mizuho and Nagara. This beautiful, beautiful man who has aged 2,000 years by now. This entity to whom Nozomi, Nagara and Mizuho must be nothing more than a distant memory, if even that. This Indian angel makes that goddamn effort to come all the way over just to contribute to Nagara and Mizuho's formal human send-off of Nozomi. Rajdhani, you beautiful thing, you. I can't tell you how heartwarming this scene felt to me the second time I watched it. It just embodies that feeling that death should bring us together, not tear us apart. No matter the distance, no matter the space that's between us, when you lose a loved one, you should always, always grieve together. Even if you're 100 worlds and 2,000 years away, don't let death create a distance between you and your loved ones. Because, as a great football coach once said, there's something worse out there than being sad, and that's being alone and being sad. And that's why Rajdhani goes through the trouble of finding Mizuho and Nagara after they lost Nozomi, because the only thing we can do for someone who's grieving is sit next to them as they cry. And so the gang makes a memorial for Nozomi, stacking a pile of stones on a tree stump and marking it with everyone's fingerprints. And as if this symbolic and emotional support of Rajdhani's presence alone wasn't enough to make our hearts melt, after adding his fingerprint to the memorial, Rajdhani faces Nagara and Mizuho, asks whether they're going home, and offers them his help. He puts on his school uniform again, and suddenly we see the old Rajdhani standing before us again. And just like the Rajdhani we know, he helps the gang, and tries to figure out alongside Mizuho and Nagara how they can get back home. The dream team is fucking back! In the ways that it can be, at least. Even though Rajdhani can't go with them, he becomes that problem-solving Rajdhani he used to be 2,000 years ago. because that's the Rajdhani that Mizuho and Nagara need right now. And with their combined effort, using the emotional development and general wisdom they gained over the years they spent in this world, they eventually succeed in coming up with a plan that will get Mizuho and Nagara home. The three of them hold the seal of approval together and stamp it on version 5.0 of Project Robinson, the final draft. They clear the grounds, build the ship, take off, run, and after all the trials and tribulations, Nagara and Mizuho finally, actually, get back home. Despite how extensively SonnyBoy discusses the subject of death and meaninglessness, it is by no means the main theme of the show. The predominant message the show leaves you with, or well, left me with, is actually that you should care about life. This message of course finds itself in the bird metaphor, in how at the end of the show Nagara looks after the crippled bird. He's drifted away from himself for 2 years, and now that he's back, he's changed for the better. He himself is more autonomous, more alive. But there is something far more subtle about the ending of SonnyBoy that also voices this message. In the final episode, we see how Nagara and Mizuho finally make it back to the real world. After 11 episodes, after 2 long years of attempting to get home, they finally succeed. They're home. In any other movie or show, this would be the triumphant climax where you cheer for the main character's achievement. But this ending just feels so empty. All the vibrant colors of this world are replaced with rainy grays. Even the abundance of instruments in the credits song that all make the song feel so energetic, hopeful, and almost a bit magical are now replaced with a single acoustic guitar, which helps setting the tone of this quieter feeling of emptiness and further emphasizes the sadness in the screaming of the lyrics during the song. The world suddenly looks so bleak and depressing when it's juxtaposed with the exciting absurdity of this world, where there were all these beautifully diverse conflicting colors making for an awesome visual spectacle. Life is back to normal again. No crazy, colorful worlds, but a nagging boss at a shitty job. No superpowers, just school. Not even a friendship with Nozomi. But you know what makes the real world so much better than this world? You know what the biggest, most important difference is between this world and the real world? It's that in the real world, in that final shot, we see Nagara smiling to himself, being content with his life. It might be weird what I'm about to say, but in a lot of ways, the ending of SonnyBoy reminds me very much of the ending of The Lord of the Rings. Anyone that knows anything about me knows that I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, and as of writing this, I recently rewatched the trilogy for the 1000th time. Just like the final episode of SonnyBoy, the final scenes of The Lord of the Rings are filled with a sort of quiet and anticlimactic melancholy. You just had an adventure of killing trolls, fighting armies of orcs, visiting different beautiful worlds, discovering abstract powers, and now you're back. Back to the way things were. Back to the world you know. You did what you set out to do, and now life isn't about the absurd struggles of summoning the courage to fight goblins or lead an army of talking trees into battle. Instead, it's about the mundane struggle of summoning the courage to ask the girl you like out on a date, or in Nagara's case, awkwardly fumble your way through your interaction with her. In a way, you could say the ending of The Lord of the Rings is a way happier ending than that of SonnyBoy. However, as I was watching that final scene at the Grey Havens, and as I saw that smile Frodo gave his friends before leaving them, I couldn't help but think of Nagara's final smile. Granted, there's a world of difference between the characters of Frodo and Nagara, but in a lot of ways the two mirror each other deeply in this final moment. A drape of melancholy covers the scene. Nothing about what just happened seems happy. The journey is over and everything just feels so lonely. And yet, they smile. And that final smile, that's all that really matters. They're back. They were successful in their quest. And though the journey has changed them forever, they've arrived in the world they fought for. And sure, not everything turned out the way they wanted, but they're content, and that's all that really matters. Because there's something in that smile, somewhat of a self-realization, or even more, a realization of what's really important. Frodo and Nagara both subconsciously realized the same lesson, maybe the most important lesson of all, that at the end of the day, all the troubles you face, all the adventures you experience, the fun adventures, the painful adventures, there is one thing that will always remain a constant in your life. After everything, there is one thing that'll always stay the same. Despite all the new worlds you've visited, despite all the demons you've faced, despite how far adrift you've been, despite everything, it's still you. And just because Nozomi doesn't remember the time she spent with Nagara, that doesn't make those moments they spent together in this world any less special. Even if Nozomi won't be in Nagara's life from now on, those moments still happened. Those moments were real, meaningful, and beautiful, and they'll stay with Nagara forever. And I think this optimistic ending to a nihilistic piece of art is what makes SonnyBoy so great. Generally, when there are these introspective masterpieces like Neon Genesis Evangelion or even Bo Burnham's Inside, the final conclusion is very often everything is fucked, the world is ending, nothing has any meaning, we're all going to die. And I feel like SonnyBoy is one of the few pieces of media that has been able to say all those things, while the main takeaway of the show is still something uplifting. And don't get me wrong, I love Evangelion and Inside, but where Hideaki Anno and Bo Burnham can't help giving their works a depressive overtone because it suits the messages they try to convey, SonnyBoy doesn't let its depressive plot points and philosophical discussions rule the general tone of the show. Instead, the show leaves you with a content Nagara, who despite all the shitty things in his life, declares,
人生はまだこれからだ。先はもう少しだけ長い。
Only after a couple years of watching this show did the profundity of this line truly start setting in for me. I think young people, and especially people who are still in school, middle school, high school, college, doesn't matter, are constantly worrying over where they're at and where they're going to, that they maybe don't know where they're going to, and that they aren't where they want to be. I myself worry about this all the time. Shingo Natsume, the creator of SonnyBoy, also directed this other anime called Tatami Galaxy. It's about a kid who enrolls into college and believes he'll experience what he calls the rose-colored campus life. But before he knows it, he's in his final year in college and he's done or experienced absolutely nothing exciting in his opinion. He regrets how his college career turned out and blames himself for making the wrong choices. He wishes he could go back and make different choices, and per request, the time rewinds to when he was just a freshman, newly enrolling into college. He proceeds to make different choices from the ones he made in the previous timeline, but he ends up disappointed again. Each episode, the clock rewinds to his first day of college, and every episode he makes different choices. But every time he's disappointed with how his college life turned out, because it wasn't the romanticized rose-colored life he envisioned. Near the end of the show, the main character voices his frustration and says that he doesn't know what he has to do to live this perfect life that he's got in his mind, to which another character replies, "There's no such thing as a rose-colored campus life." Why? Because there's nothing rose-colored in this world. It's all just a bunch of colors mixed up. I get the impression that a lot of people think the ending of SonnyBoy is very sad and depressing, but I don't think that's the case at all. To me, SonnyBoy is saying that while life may not be rose-colored, while there's definitely a lot of depressing grey elements in life, you will still be able to cherish it, because the whole of life is not simply good or bad. There are reasons to be sad and cry, but there are also reasons to smile. Sometimes you just have to open your eyes and see them. And if we take a look at Nagara's future as an old man through the Go Old glasses, we can see Nagara doesn't lose his ability to do so, and his contentedness ends up evolving into a deep-rooted happiness. I mean, just look at that old, wrinkly, toothless smile. Nagara has learned to care about his life, and to make the effort it takes to improve it. The future is uncertain, but he faces it with a smile. It's such a subtle yet such a profound character development that's just so hopeful and optimistic. Contrary to these other nihilistic magnum opuses, SonnyBoy is an encouragement to live, to celebrate your subjectivity, your unique individual experience of life. Because sure, life might be meaningless, but as Rajdhani says,
でも全くの無意味だからこそ 生きているこの瞬間、その輝きは尊いと思うんだ。それはその時、その人だけのものだからね。
And if you don't understand what Rajdhani means by this, I think the show sums it up quite beautifully through what Nozomi says and does in the final 2 episodes. In a flashback in the 11th episode, Nozomi talks to Nagara about all the things she wants to do when she gets back home. She says she wants to eat sole omurice, something with a bunch of glacé strawberries on it, Chinese noodles from Hatsune, and halfway through her list, Nagara starts laughing and calls it all a bunch of nonsense. And you know what? He's right. It is all a bunch of nonsense. But you know something else? When we see Nozomi back in the real world, we see her having that delicious strawberry cake. That same slice of strawberry cake that was by her memorial on her school desk in episode 6. So maybe life is just a bunch of nonsense bundled together. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't indulge in all these little mundane pleasures that life offers us. And of course there's friends and family and love and all that wonderful stuff. And a large part of life's happiness is definitely to be found in those places. But SonnyBoy is one of the few shows that stresses the importance of the happiness you're able to find on your own. For example, there's this little place I go to for writing. It's the cutest little boathouse coffee shop on a lake. I've known it since I was a child, but the first time I went there on my own was about 2 years ago. 3 years ago now, I guess. I was suffering from a bit of writer's block when I was writing my little poetry book, and in an attempt to break out of it, I tried to just switch to a different location to write. And this change in location worked so amazingly well that this boathouse quickly became my personal little sanctuary for writing, entirely removed from the world and any troubles. And all of the times life gets shitty, all of the times I'm feeling a bit mentally unwell, whenever I'm sitting in there, in that boathouse coffee shop, just writing, I forget about all those silly things. When I'm there, I get to see the geese swimming by me. I get to see the seasons change in real time. I get to eat the most banging fried mix. And most importantly, I get to write. I just love writing. I love writing essays, I love writing scripts, I love writing stories, I love writing jokes, I love writing videos, and I treasure every second I get to sit there just writing exactly because I love it so much. And all these grim thoughts of death and meaninglessness are effortlessly vanquished in the face of these small little moments of happiness. Because why would it matter whether life is meaningless? I feel happy when I'm writing. So by my own autonomy, I try to write as much as possible. I try to go to that boathouse as much as possible. I do it because I can, and it makes me happy. Literally, who cares whether life is meaningless? It's just nice. Or at least it can be, if you try. And while I'm referencing my own life to articulate this feeling, this is obviously applicable to everyone's individual life. Everyone should have their own little spot, and that spot can mean a lot of different things. Just a place you can go to, physical or not, where for the short moments you're there, you're able to appreciate life and all its little pleasures. And those moments don't last forever, obviously. Eventually Nozomi's strawberry cake will be finished. But it's that very impermanence of these moments, the impermanence of these experiences, the impermanence of life itself that makes it all so special, because it assigns personality to our moments. In the 11th episode, Rajdhani tells a couple tales of his time in this world, eccentric experiences he accumulated over the 2000 years that he's been there. And while this thought of an unending adventure, the endless experiences of immortality, sounds amazing, Rajdhani explains that with each passing day, he's being drained away by time more and more. All his experiences just start to blend together and lose meaning altogether. He's growing more and more indifferent to life, which, as I've explained, SonnyBoy equates to just another form of death. Rajdhani explains that all his life experiences are becoming more and more homogenized, and everything starts to blend together, and as a result, every experience loses its meaning to Rajdhani. As Rajdhani says, his immortality has just emphasized that his life is a constant cycle of vain endeavors. The show brilliantly succeeds in conveying this acute feeling of the meaninglessness permeating through this world where people don't age, as the show progresses, the final episodes start to feel more and more empty. While the first episodes were vibrant and exciting in the visuals as well as the plot, these final episodes become more and more stale and monotonous. There are less and less significant characters, there is less discord and conflict and excitement. The show is truly just trudging along more and more in its final episodes, much like Rajdhani is just trudging along more and more through his immortality. The final scene that solidifies this feeling is when when Nagara and Mizuho are about to leave this world and they meet Asakaze at the gateway to other dimensions. Asakaze explains that there's nothing left for him in this world. No people, no places, no experiences. But his superpower prevents him from fading out into this world the way others do. So now he's just standing in a shapeless dimension, an experienceless world. He will live forever, but there is nothing to experience for him. It's torture. That's why Nagara chose the real world over this world. He chose the world of impermanence and all the beauty that comes with it, rather than an immortal life in the vast, infinite, endless, meaningless this world. This is also why Nagara returns the furball from the monkey baseball world to Rajdhani, because it's not just a physical manifestation of a memory, but an atonement, an attest that that moment did happen, and that at the time that it happened, that moment had a world of meaning. The eternally lasting sunshine smell of the monkey furball will be Rajdhani's immortal reminder of the wonderful experiences he shared with Nagara, Mizuho, Nozomi, and the rest. And while the rest of his life might become more and more homogenized as he gets older, this will forever solidify those few moments he shared with them as unique and personal. As Rajdhani says, if we were to live forever, all of our life experiences would become homogenized and depersonalized, and we'd gradually grow more and more apathetic towards life itself. But because all of our lives are limited to these few little personalized experiences, we get to rejoice in the absurdity of it. This is my spot. These are my moments, not anyone else's. And I think that's rather beautiful. And that alone makes my life worth living. I'm just gonna do this bit like this. I've written a lot of scripts for this final chapter, but it just never felt right. I don't think I'm very inexperienced when it comes to just talking to a camera without a script. I'm very reliant on scripts, so I don't know how this will go. This is also the first take. You don't necessarily know if that's true. I know if that's true. See, I'm stuttering already. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna talk about SonnyBoy now. What is SonnyBoy really about? That is the question, isn't it? I'm not gonna give you a clear answer on that one. It's something you have to decide for yourself. SonnyBoy, it's a show, you know. It's not a show you can watch while on your phone. It's not a show that you can watch on a second monitor. This show demands every ounce of your attention, you know. And if you deny this request, you'll walk away empty-handed. For example, I've written like how many? Over 80, almost maybe 90 pages worth of content, of material on this little show. But the only reason I was able to write that much was because I put in that much effort, is because I analyzed that much of SonnyBoy. And the show gives back. For example, that visual of Nagara and Nozomi on the roof. I broke that down way before I actually noticed that shot of Nagara opening the door in episode 6. I suddenly rewatched the show after having, broken down that scene between Nagara and Nozomi on the roof, which I thought maybe I was just bullshitting. I didn't know, But then the show rewards you with like a little visual or something that suddenly you're like, oh, so I was right in my or this interpretation is like not invalid. And that's what's so beautiful about this show. It's just, it rewards you. It rewards all the effort you put into it. There's so much detail and thought gone into it, and so much creative integrity that went into it, that really you can just do anything with the show as an interpreter, as a viewer. Depending on who you are, depending on where you come from, what age you are, what life phase you're going through, you will see different things in SonnyBoy. I myself have, there was a period in my life where I associated SonnyBoy to graduating high school. I know they're in middle school, but there's a lot of lot of graduation and school aspects related to it. And I was someone who graduated in 2020, and I never really got closure on high school and, being out of high school. So that graduation aspect of SonnyBoy was something really meaningful to me. That interpretation means nothing to me anymore, but back then I was, thinking, that's Nozomi and Nagara jumping away from the school is, detaching themselves from school, and, now they're in a new world, in a new environment, and they have to learn how to take care of themselves in this way bigger world. And that was an interpretation I used to have years ago, but that's not invalid. It's just not something that currently I am going through anymore, or that I find meaning in anymore. And I've got plenty of those redacted interpretations of SonnyBoy that used to be very meaningful to me, but now is more like memories, And I could go on and on and on about every single one of my personal interpretations that may or may not be a little bit pretentious. But if I look at the time stamp and time bar of this video, I've been talking for a while, I've been yapping. This is really just a very self-indulgent video. I'm aware of that. But I'd say now it's your turn, because all those pages I wrote of scripts and all the thematic connections I made, that's all me. That's all just my character, how I found myself in the show. But the same goes for you. You can find yourself in the show, and you can make those thematic connections. And I would love to know your thoughts on SonnyBoy. Like, leave a comment, or maybe even make your own video essay on SonnyBoy. What does it mean to you? I can't say it enough, but immerse yourself in the show and try to understand it, because the more you understand SonnyBoy, the more you understand yourself. So, I guess if I really had to break it down, then I guess in the truest, most honest version, SonnyBoy is about you. And you might think that's rather cheesy, but I think that's kind of beautiful. Thanks for watching. Wow, what a video essay, huh? Jeez. I mean, if I were a viewer on YouTube watching this, I definitely consider subscribing and hitting notification bell and all that, all of that. Anyway, here's a poem. Poem number 33. What if my cat could just talk, and she slurs "fucking dick" under her breath whenever I neglect her. And she thinks, "fucking idiot," whenever I meow back at her, and then proceeds to lick her paw. Whoa, funny poem. That's a funny poem if I've ever read one. If you want more poems, I've got a poetry book. These are all poems by me. They're for sale on Amazon right now. Link is in the description, or well, it's a link that'll redirect you to my website. That'll then redirect you to the country closest to you that has Kindle publishing service, where you can buy my book for just $10 or 10 euros or any other currency that is equivalent to $10 or 10 euros. It's yours. Besides that, I've got a Patreon where you can support me if you don't like poems. If you're not really interested in poems but want to support me anyway, you can do that over there. Title cards. That means I'm running out of time. I've got a subscribe. I've got a Patreon book. I've got big stuff big videos coming. Next one's gonna be about Over the Garden Wall. It's gonna be great. Just subscribe.